In this video, we'll be breaking down 2 hours of unsolved Rick and Morty mysteries to fall asleep to. Let's get started. First up, we got the full limits and future of the Omega device. In the Rick and Morty universe, there exists a weapon so dangerous that even the smartest people alive are terrified of it. This weapon can do something that sounds impossible. It can erase a person from every single dimension at once. Not just kill them in one place, but remove them from existence everywhere, across infinite realities. And when someone gets erased by this weapon, the people who knew them start to forget. Their memories get fuzzy and confused. Family members look at old photos and struggle to remember who that person was. This weapon is called the Omega device, and in the episode Unsolved, we learn that evil Morty now has the plans to build it. This raises some truly terrifying questions about the future of the entire multiverse. The story of the Omega device starts with Rick Prime, the version of Rick who is considered the worst Rick in all of existence. Rick Prime is the Rick who invented portal travel first. He and our Rick, the one we follow in the show, were the only 2 Ricks who actually figured out how to travel between dimensions on their own. Everyone else just copied their technology later. Rick Prime went to our Rick's dimension years ago and offered to share portal technology. Our Rick said no. He wanted to stay home with his wife Diane and raise his daughter Beth. Rick Prime got angry about this rejection, so he did something unforgivable. He dropped a bomb in our Rick's garage that killed Diane and young Beth. Except our Beth survived somehow, and Rick Prime only succeeded in killing Diane. But he didn't just kill that one Diane. He used the Omega device to erase every version of Diane across all of infinity. Our Rick spent decades hunting Rick Prime for this murder, and in Unsolved, he finally gets his revenge. The hunt for Rick Prime leads to a trap. Rick and Morty end up captured along with evil Morty, who they run into by accident. Rick has been using a technique to flush out Rick Prime by merging dimensions and consolidating decoys. This creates shockwaves that reach beyond the central finite curve, which is why evil Morty gets involved. Evil Morty left the curve in a previous season to get away from Rick's, and now Rick's hunt is bothering him even outside the curve. The 3 of them get pulled into a trap designed specifically to catch Ricks who hunt Rick Prime. Inside this trap, they find other Ricks who also lost their wives. All these Ricks are hunting Rick Prime for the same reason. Rick Prime appears in a recording and explains what he did. He tells them about Diane and reveals that he erased her from every universe across infinity using what he calls the weapon too cool for a name. Rick calls it the Omega device, and Rick Prime says that name is what inferiors call it. Rick Prime explains that Diane was wiped from all existence by this weapon, and he built it. He says when he builds a weapon, it works, because he's talented. Then Rick Prime offers a deal. He says 1 Rick will get their Diane back. All they have to do is be the last Rick left alive. He starts a countdown, and the Ricks immediately turn on each other and start fighting. The Ricks fight brutally to be the last one standing. Our Rick teams up with evil Morty because they both hate Rick Prime more than each other. They manage to survive while the other Ricks kill each other off. When the dust settles and our Rick is the last one alive, Rick Prime reveals the truth. He says you don't get Diane back in any real sense, because when he builds a weapon, it works. He does have a Diane, but she's just a robotic copy designed to insult and hurt the surviving Rick. This fake Diane says terrible things like Rick sucked at eating pussy and his dick smelled weird. She's programmed to be cruel. Rick Prime makes it clear that the real Diane is gone forever. The weapon worked perfectly. After escaping the trap, Rick tracks Rick Prime to his lair and the final confrontation happens. During this fight, Rick Prime brags about the weapon and reveals something new. He upgraded it. The original version could only fire once, which is why he had to erase all Dianes at the same time rather than one by one. But the new version can fire more than once. Rick Prime says he can now erase Rick's whole family, one by one, until Rick learns his lesson. To prove the weapon works, Rick Prime uses it on Slow Mobius, a character we met earlier in the season who is Rick's friend and sort of an uncle figure. Rick Prime fires the weapon, and Slow Mobius screams as he's erased. The worst part about Slow Mobius dying is that he has the power to move really slow, and he accidentally uses his power as he dies, which means the death happens in slow motion, and everyone has to watch it take longer. After Slow Mobius gets erased by the Omega device, the memory effect kicks in. We see Slow Mobius's family at home looking at a photograph. His daughter points to Slow Mobius in the picture and asks her mother who that man is. The wife looks at the photo and struggles. She says that's your father, then asks if the daughter doesn't remember her father. The daughter says, "Oh yeah," like she vaguely remembers. But it's clear the memory is fading and confused. This is what the Omega device does. It doesn't just kill someone across all dimensions. It makes everyone forget them. The people who love them lose their memories and can barely remember the person existed. This adds another layer of horror to what happened to Diane. Not only was she erased from every dimension, but Beth and everyone else who knew her likely forgot her too. Our Rick probably only remembers Diane because he saw it happen and knew what Rick Prime did. The fight between Rick and Rick Prime ends with Rick losing badly. Rick Prime beats him down while giving a speech about how they're the same. He says Rick would have been him, that Rick Prime just walked into Rick's garage before Rick walked into his. He points out that Rick eventually did start using portal travel and lived in Rick Prime's house, meaning Rick basically became Rick Prime anyway by using his technology and living his life. Rick gets beaten to a bloody mess. But then Evil Morty shows up. Evil Morty switched clothes with Morty earlier in the fight to trick Rick Prime. When Rick Prime thought he was talking to regular Morty, he was actually talking to Evil Morty. Evil Morty disables Rick Prime and fries all his backup clones so Rick Prime can't resurrect. Evil Morty also does something else. He accesses Rick Prime's computer and downloads the schematics for the Omega device, the plans for how to build it. Rick Prime notices this and tries to warn Rick. He says Rick should stop Evil Morty now because Evil Morty has the weapon plans and he's only 14 years old. Rick Prime asks what will happen the next time Evil Morty gets mad at Grandpa, but Rick doesn't care. Rick is so consumed with rage that he just wants Rick Prime dead. Evil Morty gives Rick Prime to Rick, and Rick brutally kills him. Rick punches Rick Prime over and over, then drags him to his own equipment and uses it to literally pull Rick Prime apart into pieces. It's one of the most violent deaths in the show. After Rick Prime dies, Evil Morty and Rick have a conversation. Evil Morty asks Rick how it feels. Better? No? Exactly the same? He says yeah, it always does. He's asking if killing Rick Prime made Rick feel better and implying that it didn't. Evil Morty then gives Rick a warning. He says he's going to leave, but Rick should not force him to improve on the Omega device design. Evil Morty says he can end the Rick experiment anytime he wants. This means Evil Morty could use the Omega device to erase every Rick across every dimension if he wanted to. Morty asks Evil Morty why he would threaten instead of just doing it. Evil Morty explains that using a weapon like the Omega device doesn't get you left alone. He says he doesn't want a bunch of vengeful Summers coming after him. This reveals something important about how Evil Morty thinks. He knows that if he erases all Ricks, the Summers and other family members would want revenge, so the weapon creates more problems than it solves. Evil Morty tells Rick that Rick is a little different from other Ricks, and maybe Evil Morty can use that someday. Then he tells Rick to fuck off and not come after him, because it won't go well. Evil Morty leaves with the weapon schematics. The mysteries surrounding the Omega device are massive. First, how many versions of it exist? We know Rick Prime built the original. That version could only fire once, which Rick Prime used to erase Diane. Then Rick Prime built an upgraded version that can fire multiple times, which he used on Slow Mobius. Rick Prime is now dead, so he can't build more. But Evil Morty has the complete schematics. This means Evil Morty could build the weapon if he wanted to. The question is whether he will. Evil Morty said he doesn't want to use it because it would make people come after him for revenge. But having the plans means he has the option. If Evil Morty ever feels threatened enough, or if someone pushes him too far, he could build it and use it. The weapon plans might also not be completely unique to Rick Prime's lab. Other Ricks might have tried to reverse engineer it or steal the plans before. When Rick mentions the Omega device by name in the trapped room, before Rick Prime's recording explains it, Rick already knows what it's called. An inferior told him the name. This suggests rumors and information about the weapon have spread among Ricks. If even limited information about the weapon has leaked, other Ricks might try to build their own versions. The problem is that Rick Prime was the smartest Rick, so other Ricks might fail to recreate it properly, but they might succeed in making something close. Another mystery is who else might use the Omega device. Evil Morty is the obvious answer since he has the plans, but Evil Morty's personality suggests he won't use it unless absolutely necessary. He wants to be left alone. Using the weapon would make him a target. However, Evil Morty mentioned he might be able to use Rick being different someday. This is ominous. It suggests Evil Morty has plans for Rick, and those plans might involve threatening Rick with the weapon to make him cooperate. If Rick ever becomes a problem for Evil Morty could threaten to erase Morty or Summer or Beth unless Rick does what Evil Morty wants. Beyond Evil Morty, there's the question of whether the plans could fall into someone else's hands. Evil Morty is smart and careful, but things happen. He could be captured or killed, and someone could take the plans from him. Evil Morty mentioned vengeful Summers as a hypothetical threat. What if a Summer got hold of the weapon? What if someone from outside the central finite curve found it? Evil Morty broke the curve, which means beings from beyond it can potentially access the technology now. Some of those beings might be more ruthless than Evil Morty and have no qualms about using the weapon for conquest or genocide. The scope of the Omega device's power is another huge mystery. We know it erases someone across all dimensions, but what does that really mean? Rick Prime erased Diane across infinity. Every single Diane in every universe died at once. Slow Mobius got erased and his family forgot him. But there are questions about the details. Does the weapon erase someone from the past too, or just the present forward? When Diane was erased, Beth was still around and Rick remembered Diane because he witnessed it. This suggests the weapon doesn't rewrite history completely. It removes the person from existence going forward, but some evidence and some memories remain for people who directly witnessed the erasure. However, Slow Mobius's family forgot him almost completely. His daughter had to be reminded he was her father. This suggests the memory erasure might get stronger over time, or it might affect people differently depending on how close they were to the moment of erasure. Rick was right there when Diane died, so his memory stayed intact. Slow Mobius's family was far away when he died, so their memories got scrambled immediately. There are also questions about limitations. Can the Omega device be blocked or countered? Rick Prime was extremely confident the weapon works perfectly, but he's dead now and can't answer questions about potential weaknesses. Maybe there's a way to shield against it. Maybe someone could build a device that prevents them from being erased across dimensions. The technology exists to track things across dimensions and to merge dimensions, so maybe someone could figure out how to anchor themselves to existence strongly enough that the weapon can't fully erase them. Or maybe not. Rick Prime said when he builds a weapon, it works, and he seemed extremely confident. Still, Rick Prime also got killed by someone he underestimated, so his confidence might have been misplaced in other areas too. Another mystery is whether the weapon affects just people, or if it can erase anything. Could you use it to erase an object? A planet? A concept? Rick Prime used it on Diane and Slow Mobius, both living beings. But the schematics might reveal it can target anything. Imagine using the Omega device to erase something like portal fluid from all dimensions. Suddenly, no one can use portal guns anymore. Or erasing a specific element from existence, which would collapse chemistry and physics. The weapon's versatility might be far greater than just killing people. If it can target anything, it becomes not just a weapon of murder, but a weapon that can reshape reality itself by removing fundamental things from existence. The ethical implications create even more mysteries. Evil Morty pointed out that using the weapon doesn't get you left alone. If you erase someone, their loved ones come after you. This creates an escalating problem. If you erase Rick across all dimensions, every Morty and Summer and Beth and Jerry would want revenge. So then, do you erase all of them too? And then what about their friends and colleagues? You'd have to keep erasing people until you've killed huge portions of the multiverse's population. At that point, you've committed multiversal genocide, and even if you did that, there would still be people who remembered those you erased and would want justice. The weapon creates an endless cycle of violence unless the user is willing to erase so many people that no one is left to seek revenge. This might be what Evil Morty meant about ending the Rick experiment. If he erased all Ricks and then all family members who might seek revenge, and then everyone who knew those family members, he could theoretically eliminate the threat completely. But that would require killing countless innocent people across infinite dimensions. Evil Morty is evil, but he's not that evil. He prefers to avoid problems rather than solve them through mass murder. The memory distortion aspect adds another layer of mystery. Why do memories get distorted when someone is erased? The weapon doesn't just remove the person from the present, it somehow reaches back and messes with people's memories of them. This suggests the weapon doesn't just destroy matter, it manipulates information across dimensions. Human memory is stored in the brain as physical patterns and connections. For the weapon to distort memories, it must be rewriting those patterns. This means the weapon can alter matter in subtle ways across all dimensions, not just destroy it. The technology to do this would be incredibly sophisticated. It would need to identify every instance of information about a person across infinity and modify or remove that information. But it doesn't do a perfect job, because Slow Mobius's family still had photographs with him in them, and his wife eventually remembered he was their daughter's father. The memory erasure seems to make people forget temporarily or partially, but not completely erase all evidence. This might be a limitation of the weapon, or it might be intentional. Maybe Rick Prime designed it this way to maximize suffering. It's crueler to make someone almost forget rather than completely forget. Having that nagging feeling that you're missing something but can't quite remember is psychologically torturous. There are also questions about the mechanics. How does the weapon target someone across all dimensions? Rick Prime must have figured out a way to identify a person across infinity and lock onto all versions of them simultaneously. This requires solving the problem of how to define a person across dimensions. In some dimensions, Diane might have made different choices and become a different person. At what point does someone become so different that they're not the same person anymore? Rick Prime's weapon apparently solved this problem, but we don't know how. Maybe it uses quantum entanglement or some other property that connects all versions of a person across dimensions. Maybe it identifies people based on some fundamental marker that exists outside space-time. The schematics Evil Morty took might explain this, but we don't get to see them. Another mystery is whether anyone can come back after being erased. Rick Prime seemed certain that Diane was gone forever. He said when he builds a weapon, it works, and you don't get Diane back in any real sense. But Rick Prime also got overconfident and died, so maybe he was wrong about this too. Maybe there's a way to bring someone back. Maybe the weapon doesn't truly destroy someone, but moves them to a place outside dimensions. Maybe with enough advanced technology, someone erased by the Omega device could be recovered. Rick is smart enough that he might figure out a way eventually. Or Evil Morty might discover something in the schematics that reveals a reversal mechanism. Or maybe not. Maybe the weapon really is permanent and final, and everyone erased by it is truly gone forever. This uncertainty adds to the tragedy. Rick spent decades hunting Rick Prime, and now Rick Prime is dead, but Diane is still gone. The revenge didn't bring her back, it just created more death. The question of how far this power can go is genuinely frightening. If the weapon can erase anyone across all dimensions, then in theory, it could erase everyone. Someone with the weapon and enough determination could erase every living being across infinity. They could end all life in the multiverse. The weapon represents ultimate power. Whoever controls it, controls existence itself. They decide who gets to live and who gets removed from reality. This is godlike power, and putting it in the hands of mortals is insanely dangerous. Rick Prime used it for petty revenge. He killed Diane because Rick rejected him. That's it. He had the power to end existence, and he used it to hurt someone who said no to him. Evil Morty has the plans now. And while he seems more responsible than Rick Prime, he's still a teenager with trauma and anger issues. What happens if Evil Morty has a bad day? What happens if he gets scared or desperate? The weapon existing means the multiverse is always one bad decision away from catastrophe. The future implications are enormous. The Omega device is now a known factor in the Rick and Morty universe. Characters know it exists, know what it can do, and one character has the plans to build it. This changes everything going forward. Every conflict now has the shadow of the Omega device hanging over it. Any villain who learns about it will want it. Any hero will want to destroy it or prevent anyone from building it. The weapon becomes the ultimate prize and the ultimate threat. Evil Morty said he won't use it unless forced, but what constitutes being forced? If Rick or someone else threatens Evil Morty seriously enough, he might decide the only way to be safe is to erase his enemies across all dimensions. And once he does that, there's no going back. The multiverse would know Evil Morty has the weapon and is willing to use it. Every powerful being would either try to kill him or try to make deals with him. Evil Morty would become the most dangerous person in existence, which is exactly what he didn't want. Rick's reaction to Rick Prime's death is telling. He doesn't look happy or satisfied. He looks empty. Evil Morty asked if it felt better, if revenge made Rick feel better, and Rick doesn't answer. The silence speaks volumes. Killing Rick Prime didn't fix anything. Diane is still dead. Slow Mobius is now dead too. All the other Ricks in the trap are dead. The body count keeps growing, but nothing gets better. And now the weapon that caused all this pain still exists in blueprint form. Rick knows Evil Morty has it. Rick knows what that means. But Rick is too broken to care. He just wanted Rick Prime dead. And now that Rick Prime is dead, Rick has nothing left. The Omega device remains, a constant reminder of what was taken from him and a looming threat of what could be taken in the future. The mysteries surrounding the Omega device will likely continue for the rest of the series. We don't know if Evil Morty will use it. We don't know if someone else will build their own version. We don't know if there are ways to counter it or reverse its effects. We don't know the full extent of what it can do beyond erasing people. These unanswered questions make the Omega device one of the most significant elements introduced in Rick and Morty. It represents ultimate power and ultimate consequence, and its mere existence changes the stakes of everything that happens from now on. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Rick's home, C-137, the Prime Dimension, and where this family actually belongs. The question of where Rick and Morty actually come from is one of the most confusing aspects of the entire show. For years, fans assumed Rick and Morty were both from Dimension C-137 because that's what Rick tells people. But the show has slowly revealed that this is not true. Rick is from C-137, but the Morty we follow is not. They're from different original dimensions entirely. The family Rick lives with now is also not from C-137. Understanding how this works requires looking at several episodes that piece together the truth, and even after those episodes, some details remain deliberately unclear. The show wants it to be messy and confusing because that's part of the point. Rick has lived in so many dimensions and done so many reality-swapping moves that even he might not keep track of everything perfectly. The confusion starts in the very first season with the episode Rick Potion #9. In this episode, Morty asks Rick to make a love potion so a girl named Jessica will fall in love with him. Rick makes the potion, but it goes wrong. The love potion spreads like a virus and turns everyone on Earth obsessed with Morty. Then it mutates and turns everyone into monsters. Rick tries multiple times to fix it, but each attempt makes it worse. Eventually, everyone on Earth except Rick, Morty, and the Smith family gets turned into horrible mutated creatures that fans call Cronenbergs, named after the director David Cronenberg, who makes movies with body horror. Rick admits he can't fix it. He tells Morty they messed up so badly that they need to abandon this entire dimension. Rick finds a dimension where another Rick and Morty successfully cured the virus and everything went back to normal. But then that Rick and Morty died in an explosion right after fixing everything. Rick and Morty travel to that dimension, bury the dead versions of themselves in the backyard, and take their places. Nobody in the family knows this happened except Rick and Morty. They just continue living as if nothing changed. But they're in a completely different dimension now, with a different Beth, Jerry, and Summer than the ones they started with. This episode establishes that reality swapping is possible and that Rick and Morty have done it, but it doesn't explain the C-137 designation or where anyone originally came from. For seasons, people assumed the dimension they left behind, the Cronenberg world, was C-137. This made sense because Rick identifies himself as Rick C-137 multiple times throughout the show. When the Council of Ricks captures Rick and Morty, they call Rick C-137. When Rick talks to other Ricks, he uses that designation, so fans thought C-137 was the Cronenberg dimension, and the dimension Rick and Morty moved to after Rick Potion #9 was some other dimension. but this turned out to be wrong. The truth starts coming out in Season 3's premiere episode, The Rickshank Rickdemption. This episode shows Rick's backstory through a fake memory he creates to trick the Galactic Federation. In the memory, we see young Rick living a normal life with his wife Diane and young daughter Beth. Another Rick appears in his garage and offers to share portal technology. This other Rick wants young Rick to abandon his family and explore the multiverse. Young Rick refuses. He says he's perfectly happy being a normal dad. The other Rick gets angry, drops a bomb, and walks through a portal, leaving. The bomb explodes and kills Diane and Beth. Except this is a fake memory Rick invents to manipulate his captors, so we don't know if it's real. But later in the episode, Rick says something that suggests at least part of it is true. He tells Morty that he moved in with Beth and her family because he could abandon them anytime. This implies Rick has already lost a family before, which matches the backstory. Later seasons confirm that the backstory is mostly real. Rick did have a wife named Diane who was killed, though in reality, Beth survived. The Rick who killed Diane is called Rick Prime, and he becomes Rick's nemesis. Rick C-137 spent decades hunting Rick Prime for killing his wife. During this hunt, Rick C-137 eventually gave up and decided to settle down with a Beth. But this Beth wasn't his original daughter. His original Beth died young or grew up without him. Instead, Rick C-137 moved in with the Beth from Rick Prime's dimension. This is the Beth we see in the show. Rick C-137 has been living with Rick Prime's family, raising Rick Prime's daughter Beth, and being grandfather to Rick Prime's grandchildren, Morty and Summer. The dimension Rick C-137 moved to is called the Prime Dimension because that's where Rick Prime originally came from. This means the Morty we follow is not from C-137. He's from the Prime Dimension. He's Rick Prime's grandson, not Rick C-137's grandson. Rick C-137 never had a Morty because his Beth died or was separated from him when she was young. Rick C-137 became the grandfather to someone else's Morty. This is confirmed in multiple episodes. When other Ricks reference the Morty we follow, they don't call him Morty C-137. Only Rick is C-137. Morty is from the Prime Dimension. The same is true for Beth, Jerry, and Summer. They're all from the Prime Dimension originally. They're Rick Prime's family, not Rick C-137's. Rick C-137 essentially stole Rick Prime's life after Rick Prime killed Diane. The Cronenberg world that Rick and Morty abandoned in Rick Potion #9 is actually the Prime Dimension. They Cronenberged Rick Prime's original dimension, then moved to a replacement dimension after the disaster. This means Rick and Morty have gone through at least 2 dimension swaps that we know of. First, Rick C-137 moved from his original dimension C-137 to the Prime Dimension at some point before the show started. Then in Rick Potion #9, Rick and Morty left the Prime Dimension after Cronenberging it and moved to the Replacement Dimension, which fans call the Parmesan Dimension or Replacement Dimension. This is where they currently live. The current Beth, Jerry, and Summer are not the same ones from the Prime Dimension. They're the Beth, Jerry, and Summer from the Replacement Dimension. Rick and Morty have swapped families twice now. The episode Solarix in Season 6 confirms a lot of this. In Solarix, portal travel stops working because someone resets portal travelers to their original dimensions. Rick gets sent back to C-137, his original dimension. Morty gets sent back to the Prime Dimension. Jerry and Beth and Summer stay where they are because they're in their original dimension, the Replacement Dimension. This is the first time the show explicitly confirms that Rick and Morty are from different dimensions and that the family they live with now is not the family from Rick Potion #9. When Rick arrives in C-137, he finds his old abandoned home. It's empty and sad and full of memories of Diane. Rick picks up a photograph of young Beth and talks about how he wasn't there for her. He mentions that after Diane died, he couldn't be around Beth because it was too painful. This explains why Rick C-137 abandoned his original dimension and why he eventually moved to the Prime Dimension to be with a different Beth. Meanwhile, Morty gets sent to the Prime Dimension, which is now the Cronenberg world. Morty lands in the Cronenberg wasteland and meets Cronenberg Jerry and Cronenberg Summer. These are the Jerry and Summer from the original dimension that Rick and Morty abandoned. They've been surviving in the Cronenberg world for years, and they're tough and battle-hardened now. Cronenberg Jerry is angry at Morty for abandoning them. He mentions that Morty isn't even his real Morty, he's just some Morty that replaced his Morty. This is confusing because Morty is actually the original Morty from that dimension. But Cronenberg Jerry doesn't realize Morty is the same Morty who left. Cronenberg Jerry thinks his original Morty died and a replacement Morty took over, because that's what happened from his perspective when the show started. But actually, the Morty who grew up with Cronenberg Jerry is the same Morty we follow. This confirms Morty is from the Prime Dimension originally. During the Solarix episode, Jerry mentions something important. Jerry in the current dimension says he remembers Rick showing up one day out of nowhere and moving in. Beth doesn't remember this. She thinks Rick was always around or came back when she was an adult. But Jerry remembers Rick just appearing suddenly. This might be a clue that the replacement dimension Rick and Morty moved to is slightly different in ways they didn't notice. Or it might just show that Jerry and Beth remember things differently. The show doesn't make it completely clear. Evil Morty's involvement adds more complexity. Evil Morty escaped the central finite curve, which is a section of the multiverse that Rick created, where Rick is always the smartest man in the universe. Rick literally walled off infinity to create a smaller infinity where he's always on top. This means all the dimensions we've seen in the show are inside the central finite curve. C-137 is inside it. The prime dimension is inside it. The replacement dimension is inside it. Evil Morty broke out to dimensions beyond the curve where Rick isn't the smartest. This suggests that even though Rick and Morty have dimension hopped multiple times, they've always stayed inside the curve. They've never actually left the limited multiverse Rick created. The exact timeline of when Rick C-137 moved to the Prime Dimension is unclear. The show hints that Rick lived with Beth Prime and watched her grow up. He invented portal travel during his hunt for Rick Prime, then eventually gave up the hunt and settled down with Beth Prime instead of his original Beth. This means Rick C-137 has been with this family for a long time, possibly since Beth was a child or young adult. But the show also suggests Rick abandoned the family multiple times and kept coming back. Beth mentions Rick disappeared for 20 years before showing up again when Morty was a baby or young child. So Rick's relationship with this family is complicated and full of absences. The designation C-137 itself is mysterious. Other Ricks recognize Rick as C-137 and treat that designation as significant. The Citadel of Ricks has files on Rick C-137. They know he's dangerous and different from other Ricks. When the Council of Ricks puts Rick on trial, they specifically identify him as C-137. This suggests the designation is official and tracked by Rick authorities. But what makes a dimension C-137 versus another designation? The show doesn't explain the naming system. We don't know if dimensions are numbered in order of discovery, or if the numbers mean something else. We don't know who assigned the designations originally. Presumably the Council of Ricks, or the Citadel, created the system. But maybe it existed before that. Maybe the first Rick who invented portal travel started numbering dimensions, and everyone else copied the system. One persistent mystery is whether any other dimension swaps happened that we don't know about. Rick Potion #9 showed that Rick is willing to abandon dimensions and swap to replacements when things go wrong. How many times has he done this? The show hints that Rick and Morty have only swapped once, in Rick Potion #9. But Rick could have swapped dimensions before Morty was born or before the show started. There could be multiple Cronenberg worlds or disaster dimensions Rick left behind over the years. The show suggests Rick has done terrible things across many dimensions, but it's unclear if he actually lived in those dimensions or just visited them briefly. The simplest explanation is that Rick has only permanently moved dimensions twice, once from C-137 to Prime, and once from Prime to Replacement. But the show leaves room for more swaps that we don't know about. The family's awareness of dimension stuff varies wildly. Morty knows they swapped dimensions in Rick Potion #9, and that knowledge haunts him. He sometimes mentions how they abandoned their original family. But Beth, Jerry, and Summer don't know about the swap. They think they've been with the same Rick and Morty the whole time. Summer and Beth don't even know about the Cronenberg dimension existing until later seasons when things leak out. Jerry gets glimpses of the truth, but doesn't fully understand. The current family has no idea they're living with a Rick from a completely different dimension who isn't actually their grandfather. They think Rick is their Rick, when actually their Rick died in an explosion and was replaced. This creates a strange situation where the family thinks they have a shared history with Rick, but that history belongs to a different family that Rick abandoned. The emotional weight of this is huge. Rick C. 137 lost his wife Diane to Rick Prime. He spent decades hunting Rick Prime for revenge. He eventually gave up and moved in with Rick Prime's family, essentially stealing the life Rick Prime abandoned. Rick C. 137 raised Rick Prime's daughter Beth even though she wasn't his daughter. He became grandfather to Rick Prime's grandchildren even though they're not his grandchildren. Then in Rick Potion #9, Rick abandoned that family too by leaving the Cronenberg dimension. Now Rick lives with a completely different version of Rick Prime's family in the replacement dimension. None of them are his actual family. His actual wife is dead. His actual daughter is dead or lost. The family he lives with now is the third version of a family he's tried to belong to. This explains why Rick is so emotionally damaged and why he keeps everyone at arm's length. He's lost his real family and replaced them multiple times. He knows he can lose this family too and just swap to another one. Morty's situation is also tragic. Morty Prime, the Morty we follow, grew up in the Prime dimension with his original family. Then Rick showed up and turned Morty's life into chaos. Rick and Morty went on adventures, and one of those adventures destroyed their entire world. Morty had to abandon his original Beth, Jerry, and Summer in a Cronenberg wasteland and move to a dimension with replacement parents and sister. The family Morty lives with now isn't his original family. His original family is still alive in the Cronenberg world, surviving without him. Morty knows this and has to live with the guilt. He buried a dead version of himself and took that Morty's place. The Morty who belonged to this current family died, and Morty Prime is just pretending to be him. This is incredibly messed up and explains some of Morty's anxiety and trauma. The show deliberately keeps some aspects vague. We don't know exactly when Rick moved from C-137 to Prime. We don't know all the details of Rick's hunt for Rick Prime. We don't know if the current dimension has any differences from the Prime dimension besides the Rick and Morty swap. We don't know if Rick has swapped dimensions other times we haven't seen. The show wants this ambiguity because it makes Rick more mysterious and makes his past more tragic. Every time we learn something about Rick's history, it raises more questions. The dimensional confusion is part of the show's identity. It reinforces the themes of meaninglessness and replaceability. If Rick can swap dimensions and replace his family whenever things go wrong, then nothing really matters. Any family member can be replaced with a nearly identical version. Any disaster can be escaped by finding a dimension where the disaster didn't happen. This is both Rick's greatest power and his greatest curse. The distinction between C-137, Prime, Cronenberg, and replacement dimensions matters for understanding character motivations. Rick C-137 is not with his original family and has never been with his original family during the show. He's with Rick Prime's family, and now he's with a second version of Rick Prime's family. Everything he does is colored by the fact that these people aren't actually his people. When Rick acts like he doesn't care about the family, part of that is because they're replacements for a family he lost. When Rick does show that he cares, it's even more meaningful because he's choosing to care about people who aren't his actual family. Morty is similar. He's living with parents and a sister who aren't his original parents and sister. His original family is in the Cronenberg world. Every time Morty acts like he cares about Beth and Jerry and Summer in the current dimension, he's choosing to care about replacements. This makes the family bonds in the show more complicated and more tragic. The Prime dimension is especially important because that's where Rick Prime came from. Rick C-137 lived in Rick Prime's dimension for years, raised Rick Prime's daughter, and then destroyed that dimension by Cronenberging it. In a way, Rick C-137 got revenge on Rick Prime by ruining Rick Prime's original home. But Rick C-137 also lost Beth and the family in the process, so it wasn't worth it. The Cronenberg dimension remains abandoned, a wasteland full of monsters, and it's Rick C-137's fault. This dimension sits in the background of the show as a reminder of Rick's capacity for destruction and his inability to fix his mistakes. Rick could go back and try to fix the Cronenberg world, but he doesn't. He just moves on to a replacement dimension and pretends the disaster didn't happen. The current dimension, the replacement dimension, is where most of the show takes place. This is home now, even though it's not anyone's original home except Beth, Jerry, and Summer. Those three are in their original dimension living normal lives until Rick and Morty showed up and replaced their Rick and Morty. From Beth and Jerry and Summer's perspective in this dimension, their Rick and Morty died suddenly and then came back acting slightly different, but they never knew the difference. The show sometimes hints that the family notices small differences but attributes them to normal behavior changes rather than reality swapping. This dimension is fragile because Rick and Morty have already swapped once, which means they could swap again if something goes wrong. The threat of dimension swapping hangs over every major disaster. If things get bad enough, Rick could just find another replacement dimension and move there, abandoning this family too. The tangle of dimensions is deliberately messy because the show wants to explore ideas about identity and belonging. If you replace someone with an identical version from another dimension, is it the same person? If you move to a dimension with an identical family, is it your family? The show suggests the answer is complicated. Rick and Morty clearly feel guilt about the dimension swap. They know the difference matters, but they also continue living with the replacement family and forming bonds with them. Over time, the replacement dimension family becomes their real family through shared experiences, even though they're technically replacements. The show is asking whether relationships are based on history and blood, or whether they're based on the present and the choice to care about someone. Rick and Morty are constantly choosing to stay with a family that isn't technically theirs, and that choice is what makes the family real. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to which Beth is the clone, and how that choice warped their timeline. The question of which Beth is the clone is one of the most fascinating mysteries in Rick and Morty, specifically because the show has made it impossible to solve. Rick created a clone of his daughter Beth, and then deliberately erased his own memory of which Beth is the original and which is the clone. Both Beths exist, both believe they're the real one, and the show has committed to never revealing the answer. This creates a unique narrative situation where a major character might be a clone, but we'll never know for sure. The mystery affects everything about how we understand Beth, her relationship with Rick, and the choices she's made throughout the series. The setup begins in the Season 3 episode, The ABCs of Beth. In this episode, Beth goes on an adventure with Rick to a place called Fruipyland, which is a fantasy world Rick created for Beth when she was a child. Beth used to play there, and Rick locked the portal to keep her safe. They discover that a childhood friend of Beth's named Tommy has been trapped in Fruipyland for decades. Tommy is extremely messed up from being trapped there alone, and he's done horrible things to survive, including creating a society of Fruipyland creatures and doing disturbing stuff with them. Beth and Rick rescue Tommy and bring him back to Earth, but the experience makes Beth realize something terrible about herself. She remembers that she's the one who lured Tommy into Fruipyland and then asked Rick to lock the portal. Beth trapped Tommy there on purpose when they were children. She basically imprisoned a child in another dimension for decades, and she did it because she was bored and cruel. This realization devastates Beth. She has to confront the fact that she might be a bad person, that she's always been a bad person, and that she got it from Rick. Beth is Rick's daughter, and she inherited his selfishness and capacity for cruelty. She never became an adventurer like Rick, but she has the same darkness inside her. Beth breaks down and admits to Rick that she doesn't know if she loves her children or if she's just going through the motions of being a mother because that's what she's supposed to do. She wonders if she made a mistake marrying Jerry and having kids instead of becoming someone important and doing something meaningful with her life. Beth is having a full existential crisis about whether she chose the right path or wasted her potential. Rick listens to all this and makes Beth an offer. He tells her he can clone her. He can create a perfect duplicate Beth who will live Beth's life, take care of the kids, stay with Jerry, do the mom stuff, and no one will ever know the difference. Meanwhile, the real Beth can go out into the universe and have adventures like she always wanted. She can be free and explore and become the person she thinks she should have been. Rick says this would let Beth have both lives. The clone can be the mother and wife, while the real Beth gets to be the adventurer. Rick tells Beth to think about it and decide what she wants. The episode ends without showing us what Beth decided. The final scene shows Beth at breakfast with the family acting normal, and we don't know if this is the original Beth who decided to stay, or if this is the clone Beth, while the real Beth is out in space somewhere. The show deliberately leaves it ambiguous. For seasons, fans debated whether Beth took the deal or not. Some believed Beth stayed because she realized she actually does love her family. Others believed Beth left, and the Beth we see is the clone. The show gave no clear answer and seemed content to leave it mysterious forever. Then in Season 4's finale, Star Mort, Return of the Jerry, the mystery explodes open. Space Beth shows up. She's a version of Beth who has been living in space, having adventures, and becoming a badass space rebel. Space Beth looks like Beth, but with different hair and tough space clothing. She's confident and skilled and everything regular Beth wished she could be. Space Beth arrives during a big conflict involving the Galactic Federation, and she meets the regular Beth we've been following. Both Beths immediately realize what happened. Rick made a clone, and one of them is that clone. They both desperately want to know which one is real. The Beths confront Rick and demand answers. Rick admits he made a clone, but reveals something shocking. He erased his own memory, of which Beth is the original and which is the clone. Rick used technology to remove that specific memory from his brain. He did this on purpose, so he could never tell the Beths which one is real. Rick explains that he did it because both Beths deserve to believe they're the real one. If he knew the truth, it would affect how he treats them, and the clone would figure it out. By erasing his own memory, Rick made it impossible for anyone to ever know the truth. Even Rick himself doesn't know which daughter is his actual daughter. The two Beths are furious and confused. They demand Rick figure it out somehow. They start trying to determine which one is real based on memories and knowledge. They quiz each other on childhood events, family details, and personal moments. But every test fails because the clone has all the same memories as the original. When Rick created the clone, he gave it Beth's complete memory up to that moment. The clone woke up believing it was Beth with Beth's entire life in its head. There's no memory gap or missing information that would reveal which one is the clone. Both Beths remember every moment of Beth's life identically because they both have the same brain patterns and memories. They try looking for physical differences. Maybe the clone would have some tiny flaw or marker that identifies it as artificial. But Rick's cloning technology is perfect. The clone is biologically identical to the original in every way. They have the same DNA, the same body, the same everything. Rick didn't cut corners. He made a flawless duplicate. There's no scan or test that could tell them apart. Even Rick examining them with his advanced technology can't determine which is which. The clone is that perfect. The Beths consider their recent histories to find clues. Space Beth has been in space having adventures and fighting the Galactic Federation. Regular Beth has been at home with the family. They figure whichever life matches what original Beth wanted would indicate who's real. If Beth wanted to leave and have adventures, then Space Beth is probably real and regular Beth is the clone. If Beth wanted to stay with her family, then regular Beth is real and Space Beth is the clone. But this logic breaks down because both lives could make sense. Maybe Beth wanted to leave, so she left and Space Beth is real. Or maybe Beth wanted to leave but couldn't bring herself to abandon her kids, so she stayed and regular Beth is real. Or maybe Beth decided she couldn't choose, so she let Rick make the clone and then didn't want to know which one she was, which is why Rick erased his memory. Every possibility seems equally valid. The show provides hints in both directions but never confirms anything. Space Beth has accomplished a lot and become exactly what Beth said she wanted to be. In the ABCs of Beth, she's living the adventurer life and making a difference in the galaxy. This suggests Space Beth is the original who took Rick's offer and left. But regular Beth has stayed with her children and worked on her marriage and found meaning in being a mother. This suggests regular Beth is the original who decided family was more important than adventure. Both interpretations work perfectly, which is the point. The show designed this mystery to be unsolvable. Rick's motivation for erasing his memory is complex. He tells the Beths he did it so neither would feel less valued. If Rick knew which was the clone, he might treat that Beth differently even if he didn't mean to. The clone might notice subtle differences in how Rick acts around her versus the other Beth. By not knowing, Rick ensures he treats both Beths exactly the same. Both are his daughter, because he doesn't know which is actually his daughter. This is simultaneously thoughtful and cruel. It's thoughtful because Rick is protecting both Beths from the pain of potentially being the clone. It's cruel because he's denying them the truth about their own existence. Rick made a choice that permanently trapped both Beths in uncertainty about their identity. There's also a darker possible reason. Rick erased his memory. Maybe Rick didn't want to know because knowing would hurt too much. If Rick knew which Beth was real, he'd have to face the fact that either his daughter abandoned her family or his daughter is living as a clone while the real Beth is gone. Both options are painful for Rick. By not knowing, Rick can pretend both are real or neither is real, or not think about it at all. Rick's memory erasure might be as much about protecting himself as protecting the Beths. Rick has spent the entire series avoiding emotional pain through detachment and drugs and distraction. Erasing the memory of which Beth is the clone fits that pattern perfectly. The two Beths eventually reach an understanding. They realize fighting over who's real is pointless because they'll never know the answer. Instead, they decide to both just be Beth. They're both equally Beth. They both have Beth's memories and Beth's personality and Beth's relationships. The only difference is one stayed on Earth and one went to space. They accept this situation and move forward. Space Beth continues her adventures in space. Regular Beth continues her life on Earth. They occasionally interact when Space Beth visits, and their relationship is complicated but functional. They're not quite sisters and not quite the same person, but something in between. The family's reaction to having two Beths is surprisingly chill. Jerry is confused and overwhelmed but ultimately accepts it. Summer and Morty are weirded out but adapt quickly. Rick acts like it's no big deal. The show treats the existence of two Beths as just another weird thing in a family that's experienced way weirder things. But underneath the casual acceptance, there's a persistent wrongness to the situation. Every family dinner with regular Beth carries the possibility that she's the clone living a life that wasn't meant for her. Every time Space Beth shows up, there's the possibility she's the clone who abandoned a family that was never hers to abandon. The uncertainty never goes away. Later seasons continue to play with the mystery without resolving it. The Beths both develop their own storylines and become distinct people despite being the same person originally. Space Beth gets into a relationship with a woman named Daphne and becomes part of a space rebellion. Regular Beth divorces Jerry, then gets back together with him, then deals with the complexities of her marriage. The two Beths' lives diverge more and more over time, which makes them feel like separate people. But they still share the same core identity and history. Every major life event one Beth has, the other Beth could have had if things had gone differently. They're living parallel versions of what Beth could be. The clone mystery affects how we interpret everything about Beth retroactively. Every scene with Beth before the ABCs of Beth is definitely the real Beth because the clone didn't exist yet. But every scene with regular Beth after the ABCs of Beth might be the clone. When we watch Beth interact with her kids or fight with Jerry or have moments with Rick, there's always the question of whether this is the original Beth or a clone who thinks it's Beth. The show wants us to feel that uncertainty because it mirrors the uncertainty the characters feel. Beth doesn't know if she's real, so we don't get to know either. This creates philosophical questions about identity and authenticity. If the clone has all of Beth's memories and believes it's Beth and acts exactly like Beth, is it really different from Beth? What makes someone the real version of themselves? Is it continuity of consciousness? Is it being the first one? Is it the original biological body? The show suggests maybe there's no meaningful difference. Maybe both Beths are equally real because they're both living as Beth and both have legitimate claims to being Beth. The clone isn't pretending to be Beth. It genuinely is Beth from its own perspective. It has Beth's entire life in its memory. It loves Beth's children because those are its memories of loving those children. The clone isn't fake or lesser. It's just Beth who happened to start existing later than the other Beth. But the show also acknowledges that the distinction matters emotionally, even if it doesn't matter philosophically. Both Beths clearly care about which one is the original. They want to know the truth about themselves. Space Beth occasionally makes comments suggesting she believes she's the real one who left. Regular Beth occasionally makes comments suggesting she believes she's the real one who stayed. Neither is certain, but both want to be certain. The not knowing eats at them in subtle ways. They've both built lives and identities around being Beth, but there's always doubt lurking underneath. One of them is living a life that began the moment Rick activated the clone, and that person has no way of knowing it's her. Rick's role in this mess is especially complicated. Rick created this situation by offering Beth the clone in the first place. Rick saw his daughter suffering an identity crisis and offered her an impossible solution that would create a different identity crisis. Rick could have helped Beth work through her feelings about being a mother and find meaning in her life without cloning her. Instead, Rick offered an escape that split Beth into two people and guaranteed one of those people would be uncertain about her own reality forever. Rick then made it worse by erasing his memory, ensuring the mystery could never be solved. Rick created a permanent state of existential uncertainty for both his daughters, and he did it thinking he was being kind. The relationship between the two Beths is one of the strangest dynamics in the show. They're not quite friends, and not quite rivals. They sometimes work together when their goals align. They sometimes compete when they want different things. They occasionally show affection for each other because they understand each other perfectly, being the same person. But there's also resentment and jealousy. Regular Beth sees Space Beth living the exciting life Beth always wanted and feels inadequate. Space Beth sees regular Beth with the family and sometimes misses being a mother. Each Beth has what the other gave up, which creates complicated feelings. They're mirrors of each other, showing alternate paths, and seeing your alternate path embodied in another person is deeply unsettling. The show has confirmed through interviews and commentary that the answer to which Beth is the clone will never be revealed. The writers deliberately designed this as a permanent mystery. They've said that even in the writer's room, they don't have a canonical answer. They haven't decided which Beth is real because deciding would defeat the purpose. The point is that both Beths are real, and both are equally valid as Beth. The show is making a statement about identity by refusing to say which is the original. The message is that it doesn't matter which came first, because both Beths are living authentic lives as themselves now. But fans and characters within the show can't help but speculate and look for clues. Some fans believe the fact that we followed regular Beth for seasons before Space Beth appeared means regular Beth must be real. We've built an attachment to her as our Beth, so she should be the original. But other fans argue that's exactly why regular Beth might be the clone. The show is challenging our assumption that the Beth we know is automatically the real one. Maybe the real Beth left, and we've been following a clone for seasons without knowing. That revelation would recontextuate everything we've watched, which would be a very Rick and Morty thing to do. Other fans look for behavioral clues. Space Beth is more aggressive and independent and adventurous, which matches what Beth said she wanted to be in the ABCs of Beth. This suggests Space Beth is the original fulfilling her dream. But regular Beth has shown growth and depth and found contentment in her life, which suggests she's the original who chose her family and made peace with that choice. Again, both interpretations are valid. The show provides evidence for both sides deliberately. Some fans have tried to use the timeline to solve it. They calculate how long Space Beth must have been in space based on her accomplishments and relationships. If Space Beth has been gone for years, then regular Beth must have been living with the family that whole time, which would make regular Beth the one who was there when Summer and Morty needed her. But the show's timeline is intentionally vague about when exactly the split happened. The ABCs of Beth aired in Season 3, but the show implies the cloning might have happened between that episode and the next, or it might have happened off-screen at a different time. There's no clear timeline that would definitively answer which Beth is which. The clone mystery also affects the family's history retroactively. If regular Beth is the clone, then every family moment after the cloning involves a Beth who isn't the original mother. Summer and Morty might have spent years with clone Beth without knowing. Their mother is real to them because she's the person who raised them and cared for them, but she might literally be a manufactured copy of their actual mother. If Space Beth is the clone, then Beth abandoned her children and replaced herself with a copy, which is almost more disturbing. The kids had a mom, and she left, but she left behind something so perfect they couldn't tell she was gone. Either way, the family has been living with uncertainty about something fundamental to their existence. Jerry's position is particularly strange. If regular Beth is the clone, then Jerry has been married to and divorced from and remarried to a clone of his wife. Jerry's entire adult life with Beth might be with someone who isn't actually Beth. If Space Beth is the clone, then Jerry's real wife left him and sent a replacement, which means Jerry's whole marriage is somewhat fake. Jerry doesn't seem to think too hard about this, which is probably for the best. Jerry has enough problems without existential crises about his wife's authenticity. The show uses this mystery to explore themes about choice and consequence and authenticity. Beth was offered an impossible choice in the ABCs of Beth. She could stay with her family and wonder what she missed, or she could leave and wonder what she abandoned. The clone solution seemed perfect because it meant Beth wouldn't have to choose. She could have both. But the reality is that someone had to choose. Either the original Beth chose to leave and live in space, or the original Beth chose to stay and sent the clone to space. Someone made a choice, even if that someone doesn't know they made it. The consequences of that choice are playing out across both Beth's lives. One Beth lives with the consequences of leaving, and one Beth lives with the consequences of staying, and neither knows if they made that choice or if they're living someone else's choice. The memory erasure adds another layer because it means Beth might not even know she made a choice. If Beth decided to leave or stay, and then Rick immediately erased her memory of which one she was, then Beth doesn't remember her own decision. She doesn't know if she chose adventure or family. Both Beths wake up believing they're the original without knowing if that's true. This is even crueler than just making a clone because it denies Beth agency over her own identity. She can't even know what she chose for herself. The permanent mystery status of which Beth is the clone is genius storytelling, but also frustrating. It works thematically because the show is about meaninglessness and uncertainty and the impossibility of knowing truth. Rick and Morty constantly tells us that nothing matters and everything is uncertain and we just have to keep living anyway. The Beth clone mystery embodies that philosophy perfectly. We want to know which Beth is real because humans need certainty and truth, but the show denies us that certainty because life denies us certainty. We have to accept that both Beths are real enough and move forward without absolute answers. This is uncomfortable and unsatisfying, which is exactly how the characters feel, which is exactly the point. The mystery has changed how the show handles Beth as a character. Any storyline involving regular Beth now carries the weight of possibly being about a clone. Any development in Space Beth's character might be the development of Beth's true self, living her authentic life. Or it might be a clone becoming its own person. The writers can play with both Beths and develop them in different directions while maintaining the mystery. This gives them freedom to explore different aspects of Beth's personality through two separate characters who are the same character. It's a clever narrative tool that adds depth while maintaining ambiguity. The Beth clone mystery will never be solved, and that's by design. The show has committed to keeping this answer off limits permanently. Both Beths will continue existing and developing and living their lives without ever knowing which one came first. Rick will never remember. The family will never find out. The audience will never be told. This unresolved mystery becomes part of the show's identity and part of Beth's character forever. She's the character who might be a clone, and that uncertainty defines her just as much as her actual personality and choices do. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, why time travel is off the table, and what happened to the time police. Time travel is one of the most glaring absences in Rick and Morty. The show has covered almost every science fiction concept imaginable: portal travel between dimensions, body swapping, mind control, cloning, alien civilizations, sentient AI, miniature universes, you name it. But time travel barely exists in the show, and when it does appear, it's treated as something Rick refuses to touch. This is especially strange because Rick can do basically anything else. He's the smartest man in the universe. He's built devices that can erase people from existence across all dimensions. But time travel is somehow off the table. The only episode that really digs into time mechanics is A Wrinkle in Time from Season 2, and that episode introduces an entire time police force that enforces the rules of time. These time cops show up, make their presence known, and then completely vanish from the series forever with zero explanation. This creates one of the show's biggest mysteries. What happened to the time police? And why does Rick avoid time travel so completely? A Wrinkle in Time starts right after the Season 1 finale, where Rick, Morty, and Summer froze time for 6 months to clean the house after a massive party. When they unfreeze time, something goes wrong. Rick, Morty, and Summer become uncertain about something minor, whether a box fell off a table or not, and this uncertainty causes them to split. They don't split between dimensions. They split within time itself. Multiple versions of Rick, Morty, and Summer exist simultaneously in the same space, all overlapping and creating chaos. The uncertainty spreads and multiplies. Every time someone becomes uncertain about anything, more splits happen. Reality becomes fractured into countless overlapping timelines where different versions of events are happening at once. Rick explains that uncertainty is poison to time. Time can handle one definitive thing happening, but when multiple possibilities exist at once without resolving, it creates instability. The more uncertain things become, the worse the splits get. Rick, Morty, and Summer have to work together across all their split versions to re-merge into a single timeline. They need to create certainty to collapse all the possibilities back into one reality. This is already a different concept than traditional time travel. Rick isn't going back in time or forward in time. He's splitting time by creating quantum uncertainty on a macro scale. While Rick and his family are dealing with these splits, something else shows up. Strange beings appear that look like massive floating testicles covered in eyes and weird organic features. These creatures are described as fourth-dimensional beings, meaning they exist outside normal three-dimensional space. They can see and interact with time in ways that three-dimensional beings like humans cannot. These fourth-dimensional beings seem very interested in the time splits Rick created. They gather around and observe the chaos. Some of them appear annoyed or concerned. One of them in particular seems to have an official role, like a cop or authority figure monitoring the situation. The creatures don't speak in ways humans can understand. They make weird noises and communicate in alien ways, but their behavior suggests they're enforcing something. They're watching Rick mess with time, and they don't seem happy about it. The implication is clear. These beings are the time police. They exist outside normal reality, specifically to watch for people messing with time and to stop them or punish them when they break time's rules. Rick knows about them. He recognizes them and understands what they are. Rick seems concerned about their presence, which is notable because Rick rarely shows concern about anything. Rick eventually fixes the time split problem. He uses a device that creates absolute certainty, which collapses all the uncertain timelines back into one definitive timeline. The collar that was both on and off Summer's neck becomes definitively on her neck. The box that both fell and didn't fall becomes definitively fallen. All the splits resolve into one timeline, and reality stabilizes. The fourth-dimensional beings seem satisfied that the problem is fixed. They don't punish Rick or arrest him or do anything to him. They just leave. The situation is resolved, so they disappear back to wherever they exist outside normal space-time. But there's something ominous about how the episode ends. One of the fourth-dimensional beings takes something or someone with them. A character gets pulled away by these beings into what might be a time prison or some kind of punishment dimension. The show doesn't explain exactly what happens to this character or why. The implication is that someone broke the rules of time badly enough that the time police took them for punishment. This establishes that these beings don't just watch, they intervene. They have the power to arrest beings and take them to some kind of time jail where they're punished for crimes against temporal stability. Rick is fully aware these beings exist and what they do. During the episode, Rick seems worried about attracting too much attention from them. He knows that splitting time is risky, not just because it could destroy reality, but because it brings the time cops. Rick is smart enough and powerful enough to split time, but he's not immune to consequences from beings that exist in higher dimensions. These fourth-dimensional beings operate on a level even Rick can't easily fight. They're the authority on time, and Rick has to respect that authority or face consequences he can't easily escape. After a Rickle in Time ends, the fourth-dimensional beings never appear again. Not once. They showed up for one episode, established themselves as the time police who enforce rules about messing with time, demonstrated they have power and authority to punish violators, and then vanished completely from the show. We never see them again. We never hear about them again. They might as well not exist. Characters don't reference them. Rick doesn't worry about them in later episodes. The entire concept of time police just evaporates from the show's universe as if it never happened. This is extremely weird from a storytelling perspective. the show introduced an entire faction of powerful beings who can enforce rules on Rick, someone who normally doesn't respect any authority. These beings exist in a higher dimension and can see time itself. They're positioned as the ultimate authority on temporal mechanics. They have the power to arrest and imprison people who break time laws. This should be a huge deal. This should come up constantly. Anytime Rick does something risky with dimensions or reality, we should wonder if the time police will show up. But they don't. They're completely absent after their one appearance. Time travel itself is also mostly absent from the show. Rick has a box in his garage labeled with something about time travel, suggesting he has time travel technology but chooses not to use it. Rick has made comments in various episodes about how time travel is off the table, or how he doesn't mess with time. In the Season 4 episode, the Vat of Acid episode, when Morty asks for a save point device like a video game, Rick gives him something that works like time travel but isn't technically time travel. Rick creates a device that splits off a new timeline branch every time Morty uses it, allowing Morty to return to that branch later. It functions like saving and loading a game, but Rick is very specific that it's not time travel. Rick seems to have a hard rule against actual time travel. The few times anything resembling time travel happens, it's presented as extremely dangerous or impossible. Rick can freeze time, as shown in the Season 1 finale, but freezing time is different from traveling through time. Rick can split time by creating uncertainty, as shown in A Wrinkle in Time, but that's manipulating the flow of time, not traveling to the past or future. The closest thing to time travel the show has done is in Rattlestar Ricklactica from Season 4, where Rick and Morty deal with time travel snake people, but even that episode is more about the paradoxes and dangers of time travel rather than Rick actually doing it himself. The snakes do time travel, Rick doesn't. Rick cleans up their mess. So we have two mysteries intertwined. First, what happened to the time police? Why did they appear once and then never again? Second, why is time travel off the table for Rick when he can do literally everything else? These questions have never been answered in the show, and the show seems content to leave them unanswered permanently. This creates intense speculation among fans about what the real explanation might be. One popular theory is that Rick already got in trouble with the time police. Maybe before the show started, Rick experimented with time travel and the fourth dimensional beings caught him and punished him. Maybe Rick spent time in time prison. Maybe he barely escaped. This experience traumatized Rick enough or scared him enough that he refuses to touch time travel ever again. Rick learned his lesson the hard way, that messing with time brings consequences even he can't handle. This would explain why Rick knows about the fourth dimensional beings and seems concerned when they show up in A Wrinkle in Time. He has history with them. He knows what they're capable of. He's seen time prison or experienced it himself. So Rick made a personal rule to never touch time travel again, and he sticks to that rule religiously. Another theory is that Rick discovered something about time travel that makes it fundamentally different from other science fiction technology. Maybe time travel creates paradoxes that can't be controlled. Maybe every time you travel through time, you create branching timelines that spiral out of control. Maybe time travel attracts the attention of the fourth dimensional beings instantly and inevitably, and they always intervene to stop it. Maybe Rick calculated that the risks of time travel are so high that it's never worth doing. Rick can accomplish almost anything he wants through dimensional travel instead. Why risk time travel when you can just go to a dimension where the thing you want already happened? Some fans theorize that the time police are connected to the central finite curve somehow. The curve is the section of infinity that Rick walled off where he's always the smartest man in the universe. Maybe the time police exist to enforce stability within the curve. Maybe their job is to prevent anyone from using time travel to break the curve or escape it or alter its fundamental structure. Evil Morty broke out of the curve by destroying the wall between the curve and outer infinity. Maybe in doing that, Evil Morty also damaged or destroyed the time police system. Maybe the time police can't function anymore after the curve broke. This would explain why we never see them again after Season 2. The system they were part of got destroyed later. But this theory has problems because Evil Morty doesn't break the curve until Season 5, and the time police vanish way before that. If the time police stop existing because of the curve breaking, they should have appeared in Seasons 3 and 4, but didn't. Unless time works differently for them. If they exist outside normal time, maybe the destruction of the curve in Season 5 affected them retroactively, removing them from existence even in earlier seasons from our perspective. Fourth, dimensional beings might experience time non-linearly, so cause and effect might not work normally for them. This is a headache to think about, which might be exactly why the show doesn't address it. Another possibility is that the time police still exist, but Rick learned how to avoid them. Maybe after a wrinkle in time, Rick figured out a way to operate without attracting their attention. Maybe he developed technology that masks his activities from fourth-dimensional observation. Maybe that's why he doesn't do time travel anymore, because time travel specifically is the thing that always gets noticed. Rick can do almost anything else without the time cops showing up, so he just avoids the one thing that would definitely bring them. This would mean the time police are still out there watching, and Rick is carefully staying under their radar by never touching time travel. There's also the darkest theory. Maybe Rick killed the time police. Maybe after a wrinkle in time, Rick decided he didn't like having beings that could threaten him and impose rules on him. So Rick went to war with the fourth-dimensional beings and won. Rick found a way to eliminate them or trap them or neutralize them permanently. This seems extreme even for Rick, but Rick has done extreme things before. He built a weapon that can erase beings across all dimensions. Maybe he built something that can kill fourth-dimensional beings too. If Rick eliminated the time police, that would explain why they never show up again, and why Rick can now do whatever he wants without worrying about temporal consequences. But none of these theories are confirmed. The show never explains what happened to the time police or why time travel is avoided. The writers of Rick and Morty have given some out-of-universe explanations in interviews and commentaries. They've said that they deliberately avoid time travel as a plot device because time travel stories are overdone and create too many plot holes and complications. Time travel allows characters to undo anything and creates endless paradoxes that are difficult to write around. The writers want to focus on other science fiction concepts and character stories rather than getting bogged down in time travel mechanics and paradoxes. So they made a creative decision early in the show's run to just not do time travel. This creative decision explains why the time police don't come back. They were introduced in one episode to show that time mechanics exist in this universe but are dangerous and off limits. The fourth-dimensional beings serve as the in-universe explanation for why Rick doesn't do time travel. Rick could theoretically do it, but doing it would bring these powerful beings down on him, so he doesn't bother. It's a narrative device to explain away why time travel isn't part of the show. After establishing that explanation in A, Wrinkle in Time, the writers didn't need the time police anymore. They served their purpose. Bringing them back would just clutter the show and create expectations that the writers would have to deal with time travel more. From a pure storytelling perspective, this makes sense. But from an in-universe perspective, it creates a huge mystery that feels unresolved. The show established that there's an entire system of temporal law enforcement. These beings exist in higher dimensions and have the power to punish violators. They took someone away to time prison. This isn't just background world building. This is an active threat that was shown to have consequences. The fact that this system completely disappears with no explanation feels like a dangling plot thread. Some fans have tried to argue that maybe the time police only care about certain types of time violations. Maybe splitting time through uncertainty like Rick did is worth investigating, but it wasn't bad enough to warrant arrest. The being that got taken to time prison was someone else, not Rick. So maybe Rick didn't actually break any laws. Maybe the time police were just checking on the situation and left once it was resolved. This would mean they're still out there, but Rick simply hasn't done anything since then that would make them appear. He learned where the line is and doesn't cross it. The problem with this interpretation is that Rick clearly takes time travel seriously in a way he doesn't take other dangers seriously. Rick regularly risks his life and Morty's life on adventures. He fights godlike aliens, creates dangerous weapons, destroys planets, and generally causes chaos across the multiverse. Rick doesn't respect authority and doesn't follow rules. But with time travel, Rick draws a hard line. He won't do it. This suggests Rick knows something about time travel that makes it uniquely dangerous even by his standards. The only thing we've seen that could scare Rick away from time travel is the fourth-dimensional beings and their ability to enforce temporal law. Another aspect to consider is that the fourth-dimensional beings might operate on scales humans can't perceive. Maybe they're not gone. Maybe they're always there watching, but they only become visible or intervene when time gets messed up badly enough. Rick splitting time in a wrinkle in time crossed a threshold that made them manifest and become noticeable, but they're still watching even when we can't see them. Rick knows this, so he doesn't mess with time because he knows they're always monitoring. Just because we don't see the time police doesn't mean they don't exist. They exist in the fourth dimension, outside our perception of time and space. We only see them when they choose to reveal themselves or when time breaks enough that they have to physically intervene. This explanation has some merit because it would explain why Rick is so cautious about time. If the time cops are always watching, always existing just outside perception, then Rick has to be careful constantly. One wrong move with time, and they'll manifest and drag him to time prison. Rick has dealt with a lot of threats over the years, but fourth-dimensional beings that can see all of time and exist outside space are a level of threat even Rick can't easily fight or escape. You can't portal away from beings that exist outside dimensional space. You can't hide from beings that can see all time simultaneously. The time prison concept is especially mysterious. We only see a glimpse of it in a wrinkle in time, when someone gets taken away. What is time prison? Is it a place where you're trapped forever? Is it a punishment dimension where time works differently and you experience eternal torture? Is it a place outside time where you're removed from existence but still conscious? The show never explains what happens to beings the time police arrest. This might be intentional. The unknown punishment is scarier than any specific explanation. Rick knows what time prison is, and whatever it is, it's bad enough that Rick refuses to risk ending up there. There's also a question about jurisdiction. The fourth-dimensional beings seem to enforce temporal law across all dimensions. When Rick split time in one dimension, they showed up. This suggests they monitor all of reality, not just one dimension. They might be the only authority that operates across the entire multiverse regardless of dimensions. The Council of Ricks had power within the central finite curve, but the time police might have power everywhere. They're above dimensional politics and conflicts. They only care about time being stable. Anyone who threatens time stability in any dimension attracts their attention. This makes them more powerful than even the Council of Ricks was. Rick's decision to avoid time travel might be one of the only times we see Rick genuinely admit there's something he can't handle. Rick is arrogant and thinks he can outsmart or outfight anyone. But with the time police, Rick seems to have accepted that this is a fight he can't win. Fourth-dimensional beings, operating outside space-time with the power to imprison people permanently, are beyond Rick's ability to defeat. So Rick does something he rarely does. He respects their authority and stays away from their domain. Rick doesn't mess with time because the time police are the one authority he can't beat. The mystery of what happened to the time police remains unsolved and will likely stay unsolved. The show has moved past the concept and seems uninterested in returning to it. The fourth-dimensional beings serve their narrative purpose by explaining why time travel isn't part of the show's toolkit. After that, they became unnecessary, but their absence creates a weird feeling when rewatching A Wrinkle in Time. That episode presents time cops as a major element of the universe, a powerful force that monitors and enforces cosmic law. Then they vanish completely, and no one ever mentions them again. It's as if an entire layer of universal law enforcement just stopped existing, and nobody noticed or cared. This could be a deliberate choice by the writers to show how Rick and Morty's universe works. Things happen, crazy stuff gets introduced, and then it's forgotten because there's always more crazy stuff happening. The show has a pattern of introducing concepts and then abandoning them. Maybe the time police are just another example of this pattern. Or maybe there's a deeper explanation we haven't seen yet. Maybe a future episode will reveal what happened to the time police and why time travel is truly off the table. But until that happens, the mystery remains. The time cops exist in one episode, establish themselves as a fundamental force in the universe, and then disappear forever without explanation, leaving us to wonder what happened and why Rick refuses to touch the one type of science fiction technology he won't use. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to what the talking cat did that was so horrifying. What the talking cat did that was so horrifying. The talking cat is one of the most disturbing and deliberately unresolved mysteries in all of Rick and Morty. In the Season 4 episode Claw and Hoarder, Special Rick Tim's Morty, a cat appears that can talk. This isn't explained. The cat just shows up at the Smith house, speaks perfect English, and acts friendly and charming. The cat wants to go to Florida, specifically wants Jerry to take him, and Jerry agrees because Jerry is lonely and the cat seems nice. The family finds it a bit odd that a cat can talk, but they basically accept it and move on. This is Rick and Morty. Weird stuff happens all the time. A talking cat isn't even that strange compared to other things they've dealt with. Jerry and the cat go to Florida and have a fun vacation together. They go to the beach, drink cocktails, relax in the sun, and bond. The cat is a perfect travel companion. It's funny, easygoing, and makes Jerry feel good about himself. Jerry has a genuinely great time. Meanwhile, Rick and Morty are on a completely separate adventure involving a dragon and a wizard, which is its own whole storyline. The dragon adventure goes badly and creates problems, and eventually, Rick has to deal with cleaning up that mess. After the dragon situation is resolved, Jerry comes home from Florida with the cat, still happy and relaxed from his trip. Rick sees the cat and immediately gets suspicious. Rick's first question is the obvious one. Why can the cat talk? The cat brushes off the question and says something vague about just wanting to have a good time and how it doesn't matter why. Rick isn't satisfied with this answer. Rick has seen everything in the universe, and even he recognizes that a talking cat with no explanation is weird. The cat keeps deflecting, trying to change the subject and act casual, but Rick won't let it go. Rick demands to know why the cat can talk. Where did it come from? What is it really? The cat refuses to answer and keeps insisting it doesn't matter. Rick decides to find out himself. He pulls out a device that can scan memories and see into someone's mind. The cat panics and begs Rick not to do this. The cat says some things are better left unknown. The cat pleads desperately, saying Rick really doesn't want to see what's in its head. Rick ignores these warnings. Rick is arrogant and confident that nothing could be so bad that he can't handle it. Rick has seen horrors across infinite dimensions. He's been to hell, fought gods, witnessed cosmic atrocities. What could a cat possibly have in its memories that would bother Rick? Rick scans the cat's memories. Jerry is standing nearby and also sees what Rick sees. The show doesn't show the audience what they're seeing. We only see Rick and Jerry's faces. Their expressions change immediately from curiosity to absolute horror. Both of them start screaming. Not just yelling or being startled, but genuine screams of pure terror and anguish. Rick and Jerry both look like they're witnessing the worst thing possible. Their faces show complete devastation. They're not just scared, they're traumatized. Whatever they saw broke something in both of them instantly. Rick drops the scanner device. Both Rick and Jerry fall to the ground. Jerry starts crying uncontrollably, sobbing and hyperventilating. Rick also appears to be crying, or at least severely distressed, which is shocking because Rick almost never shows this level of emotional reaction to anything. Rick has maintained his composure through torture, through watching loved ones die, through impossible situations. But whatever he saw in the cat's memories destroyed his emotional barriers completely. Jerry is having a full breakdown, screaming about what he saw and asking why the cat did those things. Jerry doesn't specify what things. He just keeps saying how horrible it was. Rick pulls out a gun. He points it at the cat and says he's going to kill it. Rick looks murderous, fully intending to execute the cat right there. But then Rick stops. Rick's hand is shaking. Rick looks at the cat and then looks away, unable to even look at it anymore. The cat is begging for its life, saying it's sorry, saying it just wanted to have a good time. The cat asks Rick and Jerry not to tell anyone what they saw. The cat says it knows what it did was unforgivable, but asks for mercy anyway. Rick can't bring himself to pull the trigger. Not because Rick is being merciful, but because Rick seems too broken to do it. Rick lowers the gun. Jerry runs to the garage and grabs another gun. Jerry puts the gun to his own head. Jerry is attempting suicide right there in front of everyone. Jerry is so traumatized by what he saw that he wants to kill himself immediately rather than live with that knowledge in his brain. Rick has to tackle Jerry and wrestle the gun away from him. Rick tells Jerry that suicide won't help, that it won't make the memories go away, that they just have to live with what they saw. Rick sounds defeated and exhausted saying this. These are not things Rick usually says. Rick is usually the one creating trauma, not suffering from it. The cat escapes during this chaos. It runs away while Rick is dealing with Jerry's suicide attempt. The cat flees and is never seen again in the show. Rick and Jerry are left sitting in the garage, both of them looking completely destroyed. They don't talk about what they saw. They sit in silence, traumatized. The scene ends without any explanation of what was in the cat's memories. The show cuts away and never returns to this topic. The episode ends, and we never find out what the cat did or what Rick and Jerry witnessed. This is one of the only times in the entire series where something is presented as a complete mystery that will never be solved. The show usually explains things eventually or gives enough clues that fans can figure it out. But with the talking cat, the show deliberately refuses to provide any information at all. We don't get hints. We don't get subtle clues. We don't get anything. The only information we have is Rick and Jerry's reactions, and those reactions are so extreme that they tell us whatever they saw was worse than anything we've seen in the show before. The mystery has driven fans absolutely crazy. Everyone wants to know what the cat did. The reactions were so intense that it had to be something truly horrible, something beyond normal horrible. This isn't like seeing a murder or seeing violence. Rick has seen plenty of that and doesn't react this way. This has to be something worse. Something that even Rick, who has seen infinite realities and infinite horrors, found completely unbearable. Something that made Jerry want to immediately kill himself rather than live with the knowledge of it. Fans have developed countless theories about what the cat did. Some theories are relatively tame. Some suggest the cat was involved in some kind of cosmic crime that violated fundamental laws of reality. Maybe the cat witnessed or caused something that shouldn't be possible, something that breaks the rules of existence itself. Maybe the cat saw or did something that proves reality is even more meaningless or horrible than Rick already knows. Maybe the cat has knowledge of something so cosmically terrible that knowing it destroys your ability to function. Other theories are much darker. Many fans believe the cat did something involving extreme violence or abuse. The fact that Jerry wanted to kill himself immediately suggests it might involve something so morally repugnant that living with knowledge of it feels impossible. Some fans theorize the cat was involved in harming children or other innocent beings in ways too horrible to show or describe. Some think the cat might have been involved in torture or genocide or some combination of atrocities that go beyond what even Rick has done. Some fans focus on the cat's behavior before the reveal. The cat wanted to go to Florida specifically. Florida is often joked about as a weird place where strange things happen. Some fans think maybe the cat did something in Florida or needed to go to Florida for some purpose related to its crimes. The cat specifically wanted Jerry to take it there, not Rick or anyone else. Maybe Jerry's innocence or ignorance was necessary for whatever the cat was doing. Maybe the cat was using Jerry somehow without Jerry knowing. The cat's reaction is also telling. The cat begged Rick not to scan its memories. The cat knew what Rick would see and knew it would be bad enough that Rick wouldn't want to see it. The cat said some things are better left unknown. This suggests the cat has some self-awareness about how horrible its actions were. The cat isn't unrepentant or proud of what it did. The cat seems to want to move past it and just enjoy life, but it knows what it did was unforgivable. When caught, the cat apologized and asked for mercy, which suggests the cat has some level of conscience or at least understands it did wrong. The writers of Rick and Morty have been asked about the cat in interviews and panels. They've consistently refused to answer what the cat did. They say it's funnier and more effective if it's never explained. The mystery serves a purpose. By not showing what Rick and Jerry saw, the audience's imagination fills in the blank with the worst thing they can imagine. Everyone imagines something different, and everyone's version is probably worse than anything the writers could actually show or describe. The unknown is scarier and more disturbing than any specific answer could be. This is sophisticated horror writing. The fear of the unknown is more powerful than the fear of the known. If the show told us exactly what the cat did, we might find it shocking, but we could process it and move on. By never telling us, the mystery lives in our minds forever. We keep thinking about it, keep wondering, keep imagining possibilities. The cat becomes more disturbing, specifically because we don't know what it did. Our brains fill in the gap with something personally horrifying to us. The choice to make this a permanent unsolved mystery also serves thematic purposes. Rick and Morty is a show about meaninglessness and chaos. The universe doesn't always provide answers. Sometimes horrible things happen, and you never find out why. Sometimes you encounter something so awful you wish you could forget it, but you can't. You just have to keep living with that knowledge. Rick and Jerry saw something that traumatized them permanently, and they can't unsee it. They have to carry that trauma forever. That's just reality sometimes. The show is making a point about how life doesn't always give you closure or understanding. There's also something interesting about how this mystery affects Rick specifically. Rick is the smartest man in the universe. Rick always has answers. Rick is always in control and always knows what's happening. But with the cat, Rick chose to look at something he couldn't handle, and it broke him temporarily. Even Rick's infinite knowledge and experience couldn't prepare him for what the cat had done. This is one of the rare moments where Rick encounters something that defeats him emotionally. Not physically, not intellectually, but emotionally. Rick saw something so horrible that it pierced through all his defenses and nihilism and actually hurt him. Jerry's reaction is also significant. Jerry is usually the most naive and sheltered member of the family. Jerry doesn't understand science or dimensions or alien civilizations. Jerry lives a small, normal life and doesn't want to deal with cosmic horror. But the cat dragged Jerry into something awful. Jerry went to Florida with the cat, thinking he was just having a nice vacation with a funny talking animal. Instead, Jerry bonded with something that had done unforgivable things. Jerry unknowingly spent days with a monster, laughing and having fun with it. When Jerry learned the truth, it shattered his worldview completely. That innocent vacation became retroactively horrifying. The suicide attempt is the most disturbing part of Jerry's reaction. Jerry immediately wanted to die rather than know what he knew. This tells us that whatever the cat did wasn't just morally wrong or shocking. It was something that makes existence itself feel unbearable. Jerry's mind couldn't handle having that information in it. The only escape Jerry could think of was death. Rick had to physically stop Jerry and convince him that suicide wouldn't help, that they had to find a way to live with this knowledge. This scene shows a level of psychological horror that the show rarely reaches. Some fans have pointed out that Rick's decision not to kill the cat is strange. Rick kills people all the time. Rick has murdered countless beings across infinite dimensions for much less serious reasons. If the cat did something bad enough to make Rick and Jerry react that way, why didn't Rick kill it? One interpretation is that Rick was too traumatized to follow through. Rick was emotionally broken and couldn't function well enough to pull the trigger. Another interpretation is that Rick realized killing the cat wouldn't fix anything. The horror of what the cat did would still exist whether the cat was alive or dead. Killing it would just be pointless violence on top of existing horror. The cat's escape is also interesting. The cat runs away while Rick is dealing with Jerry's suicide attempt. The cat takes advantage of their distraction to flee. This suggests the cat has survival instincts and self-preservation. The cat doesn't want to die for its crimes. The cat wants to keep living and presumably keep being able to talk and go places. The cat is still out there somewhere in the Rick and Morty universe, carrying its horrible secrets, trying to enjoy life despite what it did. There's a question about whether the cat is unique or if there are others like it. Is this the only talking cat, or are there more talking cats with similar histories? The show doesn't suggest there are others, but it's possible. Maybe talking cats are a species or category of being that all have done terrible things. Maybe the ability to talk is somehow connected to whatever horrible thing the cat did. Maybe the cat gained the ability to talk through some process that involved committing atrocities. Or maybe the cat is unique, a singular being that somehow learned to talk and also happened to do unspeakable things. The fact that the cat can talk but won't explain why is central to the mystery. The cat deflects every question about its nature. It says it just wants to have fun. It doesn't matter why it can talk. Some things are better left unknown. This defensive behavior suggests the explanation for why the cat talks is connected to what the cat did. Maybe the cat's ability to speak is the result of its crimes. Maybe the cat experimented on itself or others in ways that gave it speech. Maybe the cat made a deal with some cosmic entity, and speech was part of the bargain. The cat's refusal to explain its talking is suspicious and implies guilt. Another layer to the mystery is what Rick's memory scanner actually shows. Does it show objective truth, or does it show the subject's memories and perspective? If it shows objective truth, then Rick and Jerry saw exactly what the cat did as it actually happened. If it shows the cat's memories, then they saw what the cat remembers, and how the cat experienced its own actions. This might be even worse in some ways. Seeing atrocities from the perpetrator's perspective, seeing how the cat felt and thought while doing horrible things, might be more traumatizing than just seeing the actions themselves. The cat's apparent remorse is ambiguous. The cat apologizes and asks for mercy, which suggests some level of conscience. But the cat also tried to hide what it did and only showed remorse when caught. If the cat truly felt bad about its actions, it wouldn't have been trying to go on vacation and have fun. The cat was attempting to enjoy life and move on from whatever it did. The cat only acts sorry when confronted with consequences. This suggests the cat might be a sociopath or psychopath who understands that what it did was wrong by societal standards, but doesn't genuinely feel guilt about it. The episode's title is interesting in this context. Claw and Hoarder. Special Rick Tim's Morty is a play on words referencing Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy stuff, which relates to the dragon storyline in the episode. But Claw could also refer to the cat, since cats have claws. The title might be hinting that the cat is more dangerous or significant than it initially appears. A cat's claws are weapons. The cat seems cute and harmless, but it has the ability to harm, just like it has the ability to talk. The title might be a subtle warning that the cat is not what it seems. The Florida detail is oddly specific and has led to fan speculation. Why Florida specifically? In American culture, Florida is famous for weird news stories and strange events. There's a meme about Florida man doing bizarre and often horrifying things. Maybe the show chose Florida as the cat's destination because Florida is associated with chaos and disturbing behavior. Maybe the cat fits in there, or maybe something about Florida specifically was necessary for whatever the cat wanted to do. Was the cat planning to do something in Florida, or had it already done something there in the past? The timing of when the cat appears is also worth considering. The cat just shows up at the Smith house one day with no explanation. How did it get there? How did it know where they lived? How did it know to target Jerry specifically? The cat could have asked anyone to take it to Florida, but it chose Jerry. Maybe the cat researched the family somehow and identified Jerry as the easiest mark. Jerry is lonely, desperate for companionship, and not smart enough to ask hard questions. The cat exploited these traits to get what it wanted. Some fans have connected the talking cat to other mysteries in Rick and Morty, but there's no evidence for these connections in the show itself. The cat doesn't seem related to the Galactic Federation, or the Citadel of Ricks, or Evil Morty, or any other major plot elements. The cat appears to be a standalone mystery, a one-off character that exists just to create this specific moment of horror and then disappear. The cat doesn't tie into larger narratives or mythology. It's its own self-contained nightmare. The fact that Rick and Jerry don't tell anyone else what they saw is important. They keep the secret. They don't warn the family. They don't report the cat to any authorities. They just let the cat go and try to forget about it. This might be because explaining what they saw would require other people to also know about it, and they don't want to inflict that knowledge on anyone else. Or it might be because what the cat did is so outside normal reality that there's no one to report it to and nothing that could be done about it anyway. Or maybe Rick and Jerry are just too traumatized to talk about it at all. The episode moves on from the cat scene quickly. After Rick and Jerry have their breakdown, the show cuts to other things and never brings it up again. Jerry and Rick presumably have to continue living their lives while carrying the knowledge of what the cat did. We don't see long-term effects of this trauma on them. In later episodes, Jerry and Rick seem normal and don't reference the cat. Either they've managed to suppress the memory and cope with it, or the show is just not addressing the ongoing trauma because it's not relevant to other storylines. The cat remains a horrifying moment frozen in time that doesn't affect the larger narrative. The talking cat mystery is fundamentally different from other Rick and Morty mysteries. Most mysteries in the show get explained eventually, or at least get enough hints that fans can construct explanations. The cat mystery is designed to never be explained. It exists purely as a void, a gap in knowledge that the audience can never fill. This makes it uniquely disturbing. We're forced to imagine the worst possible thing, and the show confirms through Rick and Jerry's reactions that whatever we imagine might not be as bad as the truth. The cat did something so horrible that it broke Rick, the man who has seen everything, and will never know what it was. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Mr. Poopy Butthole and the true nature of the sausage fella species. Mr. Poopy Butthole and the true nature of the sausage fella species. Mr. Poopy Butthole is one of the strangest and most mysterious characters in Rick and Morty. He first appears in the Season 2 episode Total Recall, which is about parasites that implant false memories. These parasites make you remember them as if they've always been part of your life, but they only create happy memories. The Smith family gets infested with these parasites and can't tell who's real and who's fake. The solution is to look for negative memories, because the parasites can only create positive ones. Anyone you have a bad memory with must be real. Throughout the episode, Mr. Poopy Butthole is treated like he's always been part of the family. He's there with Rick and Morty and the rest of the Smiths, participating in the crisis. He acts like a longtime family friend. Everyone has memories of him. The episode shows flashbacks of him in various situations with the family. But we, the audience, are watching this episode for the first time, and we've never seen Mr. Poopy Butthole before. This creates immediate suspicion. Is he a parasite? He seems like he must be a parasite because we've never seen him in any previous episode. The show is deliberately making us think he's fake. At the end of the episode, after the family has killed all the parasites, Beth realizes Mr. Poopy Butthole is still there. Beth assumes he must be a parasite because she doesn't have any bad memories of him, only good ones. Beth shoots Mr. Poopy Butthole. He bleeds and screams in pain. He's not a parasite. He's real. The parasites disappear when killed, but Mr. Poopy Butthole is a real living being who just got shot. The episode ends with the family taking him to the hospital. In a post-credits scene, we see Mr. Poopy Butthole recovering from his injuries months later, watching the episode we just watched on TV. He speaks directly to the audience and says he forgives Beth and hopes we enjoyed the episode. This creates an enormous mystery. If Mr. Poopy Butthole is real and has always been part of the family's life, why have we never seen him before? When did he enter their timeline? How did he become friends with them? The show never explains this. Mr. Poopy Butthole just exists now, and apparently, he's been existing all along. We just didn't see it. The show treats his presence as if it's normal and expected, even though from the audience's perspective he appeared out of nowhere. Mr. Poopy Butthole continues appearing throughout the series. He shows up in post-credits scenes and sometimes at the end of episodes, speaking directly to the camera. He comments on what happened in the episode and talks to the audience like he's hosting the show. He breaks the fourth wall completely, acknowledging that this is a TV show and we are watching it. But he also exists within the show's universe as a real character who knows the Smith family. He occupies this weird space between being a character in the story and being a narrator outside the story. One of the strangest aspects of Mr. Poopy Butthole is that he ages in real time. Between seasons, time passes for him the same way time passes for us. When we see him in post-credit scenes, he's getting older. He goes through life events. He gets a job teaching at a university. He has relationships. He deals with depression and alcoholism after Beth shot him. He goes to therapy. He gets better. He finds happiness. Years pass for him between seasons, and we see him age. This is extremely unusual for an animated show where characters typically don't age at all. Homer Simpson has been the same age for decades, but Mr. Poopy Butthole ages like a real person. The show has never explained what species Mr. Poopy Butthole is or where he comes from. He looks completely unique in the Rick and Morty universe. He's a small yellowish character shaped somewhat like a sausage with simple stick limbs, wearing a tiny hat and sometimes clothes. He doesn't look like any other alien or creature we've seen in the show. Some sources outside the show have referred to his species as sausage fellas, though it's unclear if this name is official canon from the show itself or if it comes from production materials and external commentary. The show itself has never explicitly stated what his species is called or provided details about where they come from. What we do know is that Mr. Poopy Butthole is treated as mysterious even within the show's universe. The Galactic Federation, which has files on countless species and beings across the universe, apparently doesn't have clear information about his kind. This suggests that whatever species Mr. Poopy Butthole belongs to is rare or unknown or deliberately keeps itself hidden from larger galactic society. Mr. Poopy Butthole might be one of very few of his species, or his species might exist in ways that make them hard to track or understand. The nature of how Mr. Poopy Butthole entered the family's timeline is never addressed. The show treats him as if he's always been there, but we know he hasn't been because we watched season 1 and he wasn't in it. There are several possible explanations that fans have developed, but none are confirmed by the show. One possibility is that Mr. Poopy Butthole exists in a dimension-adjacent way. Maybe he can slip between dimensions or timelines easily. Maybe he inserted himself into the Smith family's history at some point, and because of how memory and reality work, everyone now remembers him as having always been there. Another possibility relates to how the parasites work in Total Recall. The parasites create false memories, but those memories feel completely real to the people who have them. When you're infected, you genuinely remember the parasite being part of your life. You have detailed memories of experiences with them. Your brain creates an entire history that never actually happened. Mr. Poopy Butthole isn't a parasite, but maybe his species has some relationship to memory or perception that works similarly. Maybe his species can integrate themselves into the memories and timelines of others in ways that make them retroactively real. They become part of your history by making you remember them as part of your history. Except unlike parasites, they're actually physically real beings, not illusions. This would explain why everyone in the Smith family has memories of Mr. Poopy Butthole. Even though he was never shown before, Total Recall, his species might have the ability to establish themselves in someone's timeline by creating genuine memories that retroactively exist. The memories aren't false like parasite memories. They're real memories of real events that somehow now happened. This kind of timeline manipulation would be beyond even Rick's full understanding, which might be why Rick never questions Mr. Poopy Butthole's presence. Rick knows Mr. Poopy Butthole is real and has always been real, even if the mechanism of how that works is mysterious. The fact that Mr. Poopy Butthole breaks the fourth wall adds another layer of mystery. He's aware that he exists in a TV show. He talks to the audience directly. He references episodes and seasons and production schedules. He knows he's a character in an animated series, but he also experiences real life within that series. He ages, suffers, finds happiness, lives a genuine existence within the show's universe. He's simultaneously a fictional character who knows he's fictional and a real being with real experiences within his fictional universe. This creates a paradox about his nature. Most characters in Rick and Morty don't break the fourth wall. Rick occasionally makes meta jokes or references that suggest he might be aware he's in a TV show, but Rick never directly addresses the audience the way Mr. Poopy Butthole does. Mr. Poopy Butthole is unique in his complete awareness of and willingness to engage with the audience. He serves almost like a narrator or host, checking in with us between episodes, updating us on his life, making sure we're enjoying the show. But narrators usually exist outside the story. Mr. Poopy Butthole exists inside the story while also functioning as someone outside it. This dual nature might be a property of his species. Maybe sausage fellas, if that is indeed what they're called, exist partially outside normal reality. Maybe they occupy a space between fiction and reality, between being characters in a story and being observers of that story. This would explain both their mysterious nature to the Galactic Federation and their ability to integrate into timelines in strange ways. If your species exists partially outside normal space-time or normal reality, you'd be very hard to track or understand. You'd seem to appear and disappear. You'd have properties that don't make sense to beings who exist entirely within one layer of reality. The Total Recall episode provides some interesting clues about Mr. Poopy Butthole through contrast with the parasites. The parasites can only create positive memories because they feed on positive emotions. They can't create negative memories because that would go against their nature. Mr. Poopy Butthole, however, presumably can be part of negative memories. Beth shot him, which is definitely a negative memory, and that memory confirmed he was real. This suggests that unlike the parasites, Mr. Poopy Butthole is a complete being who can participate in all types of experiences, good and bad. He's not limited to only positive interactions, but the episode also shows that the family has exclusively positive memories of Mr. Poopy Butthole, which is why Beth thought he was a parasite. They've known him for a while, apparently, and every memory is good. Either Mr. Poopy Butthole has been an exceptionally positive presence in their lives, who never caused problems, or there's something about his species that naturally creates positive associations. Maybe sausage fellas have a calming or happy effect on people around them. Maybe they're naturally pleasant beings who don't tend to create conflict. This could be a survival trait for a species that integrates itself into other species' lives and timelines. Mr. Poopy Butthole's appearances after Total Recall are sporadic but consistent. He shows up occasionally in the background of episodes or in quick scenes. He appears in some opening credit sequences. He's there at the edge of things, not central to most plots, but present as part of the universe. This reinforces that he's a real character who exists in this world, not just a one-off joke. The show has committed to Mr. Poopy Butthole as an ongoing presence, which means his mystery remains active and relevant. The aging aspect deserves more attention because it's so unusual. Mr. Poopy Butthole doesn't exist in frozen time like most cartoon characters. He experiences time linearly and consistently. After Beth shot him, months pass and we see him recovering. Between seasons, years pass and he gets older, gets jobs, has life experiences. By later seasons, Mr. Poopy Butthole has visibly aged. He looks older. His voice sounds slightly different. He's gone through the events of several years of life. This suggests that whatever his species is, they experience time normally. They age and grow and change like humans do. This raises questions about Mr. Poopy Butthole's lifespan. How long do beings of his species live? He appears to age at roughly the same rate as humans, or maybe slightly slower. If he continues aging in real time as the show continues, will we eventually see him grow old and die? Will the show address his mortality, or will his aging plateau at some point? Maybe his species ages to maturity and then stops, or ages much more slowly after reaching a certain point. We don't know enough about his biology to understand his life cycle. Mr. Poopy Butthole's relationship with the Smith family is genuine but undefined. He clearly knows them and cares about them. After Beth shot him, he said he forgave her and understood it was an accident. He doesn't hold grudges. He seems to have a warm relationship with Rick and Morty specifically, but we never see scenes of them hanging out or going on adventures together after Total Recall. Mr. Poopy Butthole exists on the periphery of their lives. He's there. He's real. He's their friend, but he's not central to their daily activities. This might be how his species operates. They integrate into communities and families, but remain somewhat peripheral, not taking central roles. Some fans have theorized that Mr. Poopy Butthole might have special abilities related to memory, reality, or dimensions that we haven't seen. The only evidence for this is circumstantial. The weird way he appeared, his fourth wall breaking, his mysterious species. But the show has never explicitly shown him doing anything supernatural or extraordinary beyond existing and speaking. For all we know, his species might just be naturally strange-looking beings who happen to be friendly and who happen to have integrated into various civilizations across the galaxy. The mystery might be simpler than we think, but the Galactic Federation not having clear information on his species suggests there's more to it. The Galactic Federation has extensive files on countless alien species. They've cataloged beings from across known space. If they don't understand Mr. Poopy Butthole's species, that means his species either comes from outside known space, or exists in ways that make them hard to study, or deliberately avoids galactic attention. Any of these options makes them unusual and mysterious. There's also the question of whether there are others of Mr. Poopy Butthole's kind. Is he unique, or are there more sausage fellas out there? The show has never shown another member of his species. Mr. Poopy Butthole appears to be completely alone in terms of his own kind. He doesn't mention family or others like him. He doesn't reference a homeworld or culture. He seems to exist as an individual without any broader context of his species. This is strange. Most alien characters in Rick and Morty, even unique individuals, have some connection to their species or homeworld. Mr. Poopy Butthole has none of that. He's just himself. This isolation might be another property of his species. Maybe they're naturally solitary. Maybe they spread out across the universe and integrate into other species' societies rather than forming their own communities. Maybe there are many sausage fellas across the galaxy, but they're all living separately among other species, being friendly peripheral members of various families and groups. Or maybe Mr. Poopy Butthole is actually unique, the last of his kind, or one of very few remaining. The show doesn't give us enough information to know. The recurring nature of Mr. Poopy Butthole suggests the show's creators have affection for the character and see value in keeping him around. He's become a mascot of sorts, a friendly face that appears to check in with the audience. But his role is always as an outsider looking in. He's never central to major plots. He doesn't go on adventures with Rick and Morty. He doesn't get involved in family drama. He exists at the margins, which might be exactly where his species is meant to exist. Maybe being marginal is their ecological niche in the universe. The mystery of Mr. Poopy Butthole works because the show treats him as simultaneously important and unimportant. He's important enough to keep appearing and to have his own ongoing life story across seasons. He's unimportant enough that the show never stops to explain him. He's just there, like a weird fact of the universe that everyone accepts without questioning. Rick doesn't investigate him. The family doesn't demand answers about when or how he became their friend. He simply is, and everyone has accepted that. This acceptance by the characters forces the audience to accept it too, even though we're left with questions. In some ways, Mr. Poopy Butthole represents the show's approach to its own lore and continuity. Rick and Morty often introduces bizarre elements without explanation and expects the audience to just roll with it. Mr. Poopy Butthole is that approach embodied as a character. He's unexplained, impossible, shouldn't exist the way he does, but he's here anyway, and everyone acts like it's normal. The show is saying that sometimes things just are, and demanding explanations for everything is missing the point. Some mysteries exist to be mysteries, but that doesn't stop fans from wondering and theorizing. The fact that Mr. Poopy Butthole has been given ongoing character development rather than just being a one-off joke suggests there might be more to his story eventually. Maybe a future episode will explore his species, his origins, how he really integrated into the family's life. Or maybe the show will continue treating him as an unexplained presence who just exists. Either way, Mr. Poopy Butthole remains one of the show's most enduring mysteries, a character everyone knows but no one understands, who ages in real time while existing partially outside of time, who's both a friend to the family and a voice speaking to the audience, whose species is unknown even to those who catalog the cosmos. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the real purpose of a plumbus and other everyday multiverse tech. The plumbus is perhaps the most brilliantly executed joke in all of Rick and Morty, specifically because it's a joke built entirely on withholding information. In the Season 2 episode Interdimensional Cable 2, Tempting Fate, there's a segment called How They Do It that parodies the real show How It's Made. This segment shows in elaborate detail exactly how a plumbus is manufactured, with a serious narrator describing each step of the production process. The segment treats the plumbus as a common household item that everyone would obviously recognize. The narrator says everyone has a plumbus in their home, as if this is a universal fact that needs no explanation. But the segment never, not even once, explains what a plumbus actually is or what it does. We see how it's made, but not what it's for. This creates a perfect absurdist mystery where the answer is treated as so obvious that stating it would be ridiculous, except we, the audience, have no idea what we're looking at. The manufacturing process shown is deliberately elaborate and bizarre. The segment shows workers starting with Dinglebop, which gets pushed through a grumbo. Several schleem are repurposed for later batches. The fleeb is rubbed against the Dinglebop, and the fleeb juice is saved for later. A schlami shows up and rubs it and spits on it. The schlami is then cut away. There are several hizzards in the way, so a plumbus master smooths them out with a special tool. The Dinglebop is then polished until it turns into a regular old plumbus. The narrator delivers all this information in a completely straight, documentary-style voice, treating each step as if it's a normal industrial process that viewers would find educational and interesting. Every term used is completely made up. Dinglebop, grumbo, schleem, fleeb, schlami, hizzards, none of these words mean anything. but the segment presents them as if they're standard manufacturing terminology that everyone would understand. This is the entire joke. The plumbus segment gives us incredibly specific information about how something is made while giving us zero information about what that something is. It's the opposite of how informational content usually works. Normally, you'd explain what an object is first, then maybe explain how it's made if that's interesting. Here, the show assumes we already know what a plumbus is and just want to see the fascinating manufacturing process. The confidence of the presentation sells the absurdity completely. The narrator never pauses to explain anything. He never says, "as you know," or provides context. He just launches into describing the process as if we're all on the same page about plumbuses. After this segment aired, plumbuses started appearing throughout the show in various episodes. They show up in the backgrounds of scenes as ordinary household objects. You can spot them in alien homes, in shops, sitting on shelves, hanging on walls. They're treated as completely mundane items that exist in this universe as common consumer products. Every time a plumbus appears on screen, the show is reinforcing the joke. Look, there's a thing. It exists. Everyone has one. We're not going to tell you what it does. The consistency of this gag across multiple seasons shows the writers are committed to never explaining the plumbus. It's a permanent mystery by design. The genius of the plumbus is that it makes the audience feel like they're missing something obvious. When you watch the How They Do It segment, part of your brain insists there must be a reveal coming. Surely at the end of the manufacturing process, they'll show someone using a plumbus for its intended purpose. Surely the narrator will eventually mention what it does. But no. The segment ends with, turns into a regular old plumbus, and that's it. You're left wondering if you missed something, if there was a joke you didn't catch, if everyone else somehow knows what a plumbus is, and you're the only one who doesn't. That feeling of being left out of the joke is itself the joke. Fans have developed endless theories about what a plumbus might do. Some suggest it's a universal tool that can be used for many purposes, like a multiverse Swiss Army knife. Some think it's a kitchen implement. Some believe it's decorative. Some theorize it's a sex toy. Given the show's tendency toward crude humor and the somewhat suggestive appearance of the object, some fans argue it's completely useless and exists purely as a status symbol or cultural item, like how humans have decorative objects that serve no practical function. Every theory is equally valid because the show has never confirmed anything. The plumbus can be whatever you imagine it to be, which is part of why the mystery works so well. The plumbus also represents something larger about the Rick and Morty universe. It's an example of how the show builds its multiverse with confidence and specificity while deliberately leaving huge gaps in explanation. The multiverse in Rick and Morty is full of things that exist, that are treated as normal and mundane within that universe, but that are never explained to the audience. The show assumes we can figure things out from context, or that we'll just accept things without needing everything spelled out. This creates a sense of a lived-in universe that doesn't exist solely for the benefit of the audience. Things exist whether we understand them or not. There are other examples of this approach scattered throughout the show. Fleeb juice, which is mentioned in the plumbus manufacturing segment, is saved for later, but we never learn what fleeb juice is used for. Schleim gets repurposed for later batches, but we don't know what schleim is or what it does or why it's valuable. These are materials and substances that clearly have value and function in the Rick and Morty universe, but the show doesn't pause to explain them. They're just facts of existence in this multiverse. You can buy fleeb juice somewhere. Schleim is apparently a resource that gets reused. These things are known to the characters, just not to us. The show does this with technology and aliens and locations constantly. Characters travel to planets and interact with alien species without stopping to explain the history or biology or culture of everything they encounter. Rick uses devices that are never fully explained. He pulls tools out of nowhere that do specific things, and we understand what they do by watching them work, not through exposition. The plumbus is just the most extreme example of this approach. It's a thing that exists. Everyone in universe understands it, and we're not going to get an explanation because people who live in that universe wouldn't need one. This creates an interesting relationship between the audience and the show's universe. We're outsiders looking in. We don't have the context that characters within the universe have. We don't know what's normal there and what's strange. When we see a plumbus sitting on a shelf, we can't tell if it's supposed to be funny that it's there or if it's just a mundane object. The characters aren't reacting to it because to them it's completely ordinary. We're the only ones who find it weird because we're the only ones who don't know what it is. This makes us feel like tourists in the Rick and Morty multiverse rather than natives. The plumbus has become iconic merchandise and fan content. People make real plumbuses as props and jokes. People buy plumbus merchandise. The object has taken on a life of its own in fan culture, divorced from the show. This is hilarious because it means people are buying and making objects whose function is deliberately unknown. You can own a real physical plumbus, hold it in your hands, and still have no idea what it's supposed to do. The mystery persists in the real world. This might be the most successful instance of a fictional object becoming real without anyone understanding what it is. Some fans have tried to deduce the plumbus's function from its appearance. The object shown in the How They Do It segment looks somewhat organic, with a bulbous shape and what might be a handle or protrusion. It's pink and fleshy looking. Based purely on visual appearance, it could be a kitchen tool, a personal hygiene item, a decoration, or something else entirely. The ambiguous design is perfect because it looks like it could be almost anything. It's not obviously a weapon or a communication device or a vehicle. It's just a shaped object that could serve any number of purposes. The design refuses to give away the answer. The manufacturing process itself is interesting to analyze. The segment shows that plumbuses are made by hand by skilled workers, not mass-produced by machines. This suggests they're somewhat valuable, or at least traditional items. The plumbus master who smooths out the hazards is described with a title, suggesting this is a respected profession. The process involves multiple steps and multiple types of materials, suggesting the plumbus is not a simple object. Whatever it does, it's complex enough to require careful construction and expertise to make. This implies the plumbus serves an important function. Otherwise, why would the manufacturing process be so elaborate? But maybe that's not true. Maybe the elaborate manufacturing process is part of the joke. Maybe plumbuses don't actually do anything important, and the complex process exists for cultural or historical reasons, like how some real-world products are made using traditional methods that are inefficient but valued. Maybe the whole point is that this elaborate process creates something mundane and simple. That would fit Rick and Morty's sense of humor perfectly. All this work and expertise going into making something that everyone has, but that serves a minor or pointless function. The statement, "Everyone has a plumbus in their home," is key to understanding the mystery. This isn't specialized equipment that only certain people need. This isn't luxury goods that only the wealthy have. Everyone has one. This means the plumbus serves some universal function that all households require. Or it's such an ingrained cultural object that owning one is expected regardless of its utility. In real life, what objects do most homes have? Furniture, dishes, basic tools, entertainment devices. The plumbus apparently falls into that category of universal household items. But what universal need does it fill that we don't already have filled by other objects? One interpretation is that the plumbus is the show's way of commenting on how we accept weird things in our own world without questioning them. There are objects and traditions and cultural practices in real life that would seem absolutely bizarre to an outsider, but that we treat as completely normal because we grew up with them. The plumbus is asking, what if you were the outsider? What if you encountered a culture where everyone has this weird pink fleshy thing in their home and they all understand what it's for, but you don't? That's how aliens might feel visiting Earth and seeing our stuff. Why do you have a plunger? What's a garlic press for? Why do some people own decorative plates they never use? Cultural context makes things make sense, and without that context, everything is mysterious. The plumbus also works as comedy through sheer commitment. The show could have done a one-off joke where a weird object appears and isn't explained. Instead, the show created an entire fake documentary about manufacturing this object, gave it a name, established it as a universal household item, and then kept including it in background details across multiple seasons. The commitment to the bit makes it funnier. Every time you spot a plumbus in a scene, the joke reinforces itself. The show is so confident in not explaining the plumbus that it keeps putting plumbuses everywhere, daring you to demand an explanation that will never come. There's also something funny about the specificity of the manufacturing process contrasted with the vagueness of the purpose. The show invented an entire vocabulary of fake materials and processes. Someone had to sit down and come up with the words dinglebop, grumbo, schleem, fleeb, schlammy, and hizzards. Someone had to write out the sequence of how these imaginary materials interact. Someone had to design what the manufacturing looks like visually. All this creative effort went into building a detailed answer to a question nobody asked, while refusing to answer the obvious question everyone has. It's comedy through misdirection and commitment to the wrong details. The mystery of the plumbus has never been addressed in any official capacity outside the show. The writers haven't explained it in interviews. There's no canonical answer hidden somewhere. The plumbus's function is genuinely unknown because it was never decided. The writers created an object specifically to not explain it. This is different from mysteries that have answers the show is withholding. The plumbus doesn't have an answer. It exists as pure mystery, a deliberate gap in knowledge that will never be filled. This makes it unique among Rick and Morty mysteries. Other everyday multiverse technology in the show gets similar treatment, though nothing as extreme as the plumbus. We see alien devices and tools used casually without explanation. Characters eat foods we've never seen before. They use bathroom facilities that look weird to us. They interact with technology we don't understand. Most of this stuff is just background detail that helps make the universe feel real and alien. But occasionally, the show highlights something like the plumbus and makes the mystery itself the joke. The plumbus has also spawned fan content where people try to assign functions to it. People have made fake advertisements for plumbuses. People have written fake instruction manuals. People have created elaborate theories and presentations about what plumbuses might do and how they might work. All of this is playing with the central joke. Nobody knows what it does, so everyone can make up their own answer, and all answers are equally valid because there's no canon answer to contradict them. The plumbus is whatever you want it to be. In a way, the plumbus represents the show's relationship with its audience perfectly. Rick and Morty often refuses to give audiences what they expect or want. The show subverts expectations, withholds explanations, and makes jokes out of narrative conventions. The plumbus is that approach distilled into a single object. You want to know what it is? Too bad. The show doesn't care if you know. The show is going to keep putting plumbuses in scenes, and characters are going to keep treating them as normal, and you're never going to get an answer. Deal with it. That's very Rick and Morty in spirit. The beauty of the plumbus mystery is that it genuinely doesn't matter what a plumbus does. The joke works because it's unexplained. If the show ever revealed what a plumbus is for, the joke would die. Whatever explanation they gave would be disappointing compared to the mystery. The fun is in the not knowing, in the absurdity of something being simultaneously ubiquitous and incomprehensible. The plumbus achieves perfect comedy through permanent ambiguity. So the plumbus remains unexplained, sitting on shelves in alien homes across the multiverse, manufactured through elaborate processes involving dinglebops and fleeb and schlammies, owned by everyone, understood by everyone except us. It's a perfect embodiment of how Rick and Morty builds its universe with confidence and specificity, while deliberately leaving us confused and excluded. We're not part of that universe, so we don't get to understand everything in it. The plumbus is normal there and mysterious here, and that's exactly how it should be. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the true rules and risks of memory editing in the Smith family. Memory editing is one of the most disturbing technologies Rick uses regularly on his family, and the show has revealed just enough about how it works to make us realize we don't understand the full implications at all. Across multiple episodes, we see Rick storing memories, deleting them, altering them, and even creating living versions of himself that exist inside other people's memories. But the rules governing this technology remain largely mysterious. We don't know how stable these edits are over time. We don't know how many people are walking around with hidden memory Ricks living in their heads. We don't know what permanent damage this does to someone's brain and psyche. The show keeps revealing new horrifying aspects of memory manipulation while refusing to explain the complete picture. The first major revelation about Rick's memory editing comes in the Season 3 episode Morty's Mind Blowers. This episode reveals that Rick has been regularly erasing Morty's memories and storing them in physical vials. Rick has an entire room full of these vials, organized and labeled, containing memories he removed from Morty's mind. The existence of this room means Rick has been editing Morty's memories frequently throughout their adventures together. Every time something traumatic happened, or Morty learned something Rick didn't want him to know, or Morty did something embarrassing, Rick could just erase it. Morty has been living with an edited version of his own history without knowing it. The episode shows several of these removed memories when Rick and Morty watch them. Some memories show Morty doing terrible things, like causing the death of innocent people through his mistakes or stupidity. Some memories show Rick doing terrible things to Morty, like humiliating him or betraying his trust. Some memories are just uncomfortable truths that Morty learned and Rick decided were better forgotten. The common thread is that these are all memories that would make Morty's life harder or make him question his relationship with Rick. By removing them, Rick has been curating Morty's perception of reality to keep Morty compliant and willing to go on adventures. The storage system itself raises questions. The memories are contained in vials that can be plugged into a device for viewing. This means memories can be extracted from the brain and exist as physical or digital objects separate from the person. But what exactly is being stored? Is it just the recording of an experience, like a video file? Or is it the actual neural patterns that made up that memory in Morty's brain? If memories can be removed this completely, what fills the gap they leave? Does the brain create false memories to explain the missing time? Does time just seem to skip from before the memory to after it? When Rick and Morty watch these stored memories, they fully re-experience them as if they're happening. They don't just see the memory like watching a movie. They feel the emotions and live through the moment again. This suggests the stored memories contain all the sensory and emotional data from the original experience. The technology isn't just recording images and sounds. It's capturing the complete subjective experience of that moment, including feelings, thoughts, physical sensations, everything. This is far more advanced than just memory editing. This is complete consciousness recording and playback. The episode also reveals that Rick doesn't just edit Morty's memories. He edits his own sometimes too. Some of the vials contain Rick's memories that he chose to remove from himself. This means Rick has the same technology applied to his own brain. Rick can delete parts of his own past whenever he wants. This explains some of Rick's behavior throughout the show. When Rick seems inconsistent or contradictory, it might be because he's literally missing memories that would provide context for his actions. Rick might have removed so many of his own memories that he no longer has a complete picture of his own history. The stability of these edits becomes a major question. When a memory is removed, does it stay removed permanently? The fact that Rick stores the memories suggests they don't naturally disappear. Rick has to keep them somewhere, which implies that if he didn't actively store them, they might somehow return or leak back into the person's consciousness. Or maybe Rick stores them because he might want to restore them later, or because he's sentimental and can't bring himself to permanently destroy Morty's experiences, even when he removes them from Morty's awareness. The episode shows that watching the stored memories can trigger a cascade effect. When Rick and Morty start watching removed memories, it destabilizes them psychologically. They start questioning everything about their relationship and their history. The family gets involved and chaos erupts. By the end, everyone has had memories removed and restored multiple times, and they're all confused about what actually happened and what they actually remember. This suggests that memory editing isn't clean. Removing and restoring memories creates instability and confusion. The brain doesn't handle having memories deleted and reinstalled gracefully. The next major revelation comes in Season 5's Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort. This episode goes much deeper into how memory technology works and reveals something absolutely horrifying. Rick goes into Bird Person's mind to help him recover from being turned into a cyborg by the Galactic Federation. Inside Bird Person's mind, Rick discovers that memories can be rendered as physical spaces and constructs. Bird Person's memories exist as locations that can be visited and explored. These aren't just recordings. These are living simulations of past events that continue to exist in some form inside the mind. More disturbing is the discovery that Rick has placed copies of himself inside Bird Person's memories. These memory Ricks are functional versions of Rick's consciousness that exist within specific memories. They're not just recordings of Rick. They're independent copies that can think, act, and defend themselves. When Rick enters Bird Person's mind, He encounters these memory ricks and has to deal with them. Some of them have been living in Bird Person's memories for years, defending those memories from being accessed or altered. These memory ricks are essentially sleeper agents that Rick planted in his friend's mind without his knowledge or consent. The episode reveals that Rick has done this to multiple people, not just Bird Person. Rick casually mentions that he's hidden memory ricks in various people's heads over the years. This means there are copies of Rick's consciousness living inside the minds of people throughout the universe, existing as guardians or weapons or who knows what else. These memory ricks can be activated or can activate themselves under certain conditions. They can influence the person whose mind they inhabit. They can defend memories from being altered or deleted. They're independent agents with their own agendas, even if those agendas are ultimately serving Rick's interests. This raises terrifying questions about consent and autonomy. If Rick can place functioning copies of himself inside people's minds without them knowing, what else can he do? Can these memory ricks read the person's thoughts? Can they influence decisions? Can they communicate with the original Rick somehow? How much of someone's behavior is actually their own if they have a memory rick living in their head? The episode doesn't answer these questions. It just reveals that this technology exists, and Rick uses it, then moves on without exploring the full implications. The fact that memory ricks can exist independently for years suggests that memories in the Rick and Morty universe aren't just static recordings. They're active constructs that have some kind of persistence and vitality. A memory can contain a living consciousness that continues to exist as long as the memory exists. This is more like creating a digital copy of someone and trapping them in a simulated environment than it is like recording a video. The memory ricks are experiencing existence inside these memories. They're conscious and aware, and living in a limited reality defined by the memory they inhabit. This has huge implications for everyone whose memories Rick has edited. When Rick removes a memory from Morty and stores it, is there a memory Morty living inside that stored memory vial? Is there a conscious copy of Morty experiencing that moment over and over in storage? If Rick creates false memories or alters existing ones, does that create new conscious entities living inside the altered memories? The show never addresses whether these memory constructs are conscious in a way that matters morally, but the existence of functional memory ricks suggests consciousness can definitely exist within memories. The long-term damage of memory editing is another huge unknown. We see that people can become psychologically unstable when their memories are messed with. In Morty's Mind Blowers, watching removed memories causes immediate distress. But what about years of regular memory editing? Morty has had dozens or possibly hundreds of memories removed by Rick over the course of their adventures. What does that do to a developing teenage brain? Does it cause permanent damage? Does it create gaps in personality development? Does it prevent Morty from learning from his mistakes since Rick keeps erasing the mistakes? Morty might not even know his own personality anymore. If Rick has been editing Morty's memories since they started adventuring together, then Morty's sense of self is based on an incomplete and curated version of his own history. Morty thinks he's the person who has experienced certain things and learned certain lessons, but many of his actual experiences have been removed. Who is Morty really if so much of his past has been deleted? Is he still the same person, or has Rick essentially created a new person by selectively editing what Morty remembers about his own life? The technology also raises questions about identity and continuity of consciousness. If your memories can be removed, stored, edited, and reinstalled, are you still the same person? If Rick creates a memory Rick inside someone's mind, is that memory Rick actually Rick? Does it have the same rights and moral status as the original Rick? If Rick dies, but memory Ricks continue existing in other people's minds, has Rick actually died? These are philosophical questions the show doesn't answer, but inevitably raises by showing this technology in action. The episode Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort also shows that memories can be weaponized in direct combat. Inside Bird Person's mind, memory Ricks fight using weapons created from memory material. They can construct barriers and tools and weapons from the substance of memories. This means memories aren't just information. They're a kind of matter or energy that can be manipulated and shaped. The rules of how this works aren't explained. Can any memory be turned into a weapon? Can you destroy memories by using them as weapons? What happens to the person's mind if memories are weaponized and destroyed in combat? There's also the question of how many people know about their memory editing. Morty discovers that Rick has been editing his memories in Morty's mind blowers, and he's understandably horrified. But does Morty remember this discovery now? Did Rick erase Morty's memory of discovering the memory editing? It's entirely possible that Morty has discovered Rick's memory manipulation multiple times, been traumatized by it, and then had that discovery erased each time. The show never confirms whether Morty currently remembers the events of that episode or not. If Rick can erase memories at will, he can erase someone's knowledge of him, erasing memories, creating a perfect trap. Bird Person probably doesn't know about the memory Ricks in his head even after the events of Rickternal Friendshine. Rick went into Bird Person's mind and dealt with the memory Ricks, but Bird Person was unconscious or not in control during this. When Bird Person wakes up, does he know Rick planted copies of himself in his memories years ago? Does he know those copies might still be there? The show suggests Bird Person has no idea, which means Rick has violated his friend's mind and autonomy repeatedly without his knowledge or permission, and continues to keep this secret. The scale of Rick's memory manipulation across the universe is unknown. If Rick has been planting memory Ricks in people's minds and editing memories regularly for decades, how many people are affected? Rick has traveled to countless dimensions and met countless people. How many of them have had their memories altered? How many have hidden memory Ricks living in their heads? The technology exists, Rick has it, and Rick has shown he's willing to use it casually on his own family. There's no reason to think he's been more restrained with strangers or enemies. The number of people walking around with edited memories or hidden memory Ricks could be enormous. There's also the question of whether other Ricks have this technology. Presumably most or all Ricks have figured out memory editing since it seems like basic neuroscience in this universe. This means all the stuff Rick does to Morty, other Ricks probably do to their Mortys. Every Morty might have edited memories. Every Morty might have memory Ricks hidden in their heads. The central finite curve might be full of people whose memories have been altered by Ricks for various purposes. Memory itself becomes an unreliable narrator across the multiverse, if anyone smart enough can edit anyone's memories at will. The ethics of Rick's memory editing are obviously terrible, but the show doesn't dwell on this much. Rick sees memories as just another thing he can manipulate for convenience. If Morty has a traumatic experience, rather than helping Morty process and cope with it, Rick just deletes it. If Rick needs to hide something from someone, he edits their memory. If Rick wants to control someone's behavior, he can edit their memories to change their personality and motivations. Rick treats consciousness and identity as toys to be modified according to his preferences. The show presents this as horrible, but doesn't have characters confront Rick about it in lasting ways. The stored memory vials in Rick's garage represent a strange kind of externalized consciousness. These vials contain pieces of Morty's lived experience that Morty is no longer aware of. They're parts of Morty existing outside of Morty. If someone else were to watch these memories, they'd know things about Morty that Morty himself doesn't know. They'd have access to Morty's subjective experiences, his thoughts and feelings during those moments, in ways that Morty no longer has. This creates weird scenarios where other people could potentially understand Morty better than Morty understands himself, because they have access to deleted parts of his history. The potential for memory editing to be used for good exists but is rarely explored. Rick could theoretically remove traumatic memories to genuinely help people cope with PTSD or abuse. He could edit memories to help people overcome addictions or phobias. He could create positive memories to give people joy they never experienced. But Rick doesn't use the technology this way except occasionally and pragmatically. He uses it mostly for control and convenience. The show acknowledges this could be therapeutic, but shows it being used for manipulation instead. There's a question about whether memory editing actually changes who someone is, or just changes what they remember. If Rick removes Morty's memory of a traumatic event, has Rick actually helped Morty, or has he just made Morty unaware of his own trauma? The trauma might still affect Morty on an unconscious level. The brain might remember things the conscious mind doesn't. Memory editing might just be suppression rather than actual healing. But the show never explores whether people with edited memories show signs of repressed trauma, or if the editing actually does cleanly remove the psychological impact of experiences. The technology also enables Rick to escape consequences for his actions. If Rick does something terrible to Morty, he can just make Morty forget it happened. This creates a moral hazard where Rick can behave worse because he can erase the evidence from the victim's mind. Morty might forgive Rick many times for the same types of betrayals because Rick keeps erasing Morty's memory of past betrayals. The relationship between Rick and Morty might be much worse than Morty realizes because Morty doesn't remember half the terrible things Rick has done to him. The existence of memory Ricks raises questions about Rick's paranoia and trust issues. Rick plants copies of himself in people's minds as defensive measures or weapons. This suggests Rick doesn't trust anyone, not even his closest friends like Bird Person. Rick assumes he'll need leverage or defenses inside people's minds eventually. This is an incredible violation of trust done in the name of distrust. Rick's friendships are literally infected with copies of himself that exist to serve his interests. How can someone have a genuine relationship with Rick if Rick has planted sleeper agents in their mind? The rules for how memory Ricks activate and what triggers them are unclear. Do they activate when someone tries to access certain memories? Do they activate when someone tries to harm the person whose mind they're in? Can Rick remotely activate them? Can they activate on their own if they perceive a threat? The episode shows memory Ricks defending Bird Person's memories, but we don't know exactly what rules they're operating under. Are they conscious all the time, or do they only wake up when needed? If they're conscious all the time, what's their experience like living inside someone else's memory indefinitely? The long-term stability of memory Ricks is another unknown. How long can they exist? Can they degrade or go insane from isolation? Can they evolve and change from their original programming? A memory Rick that's been living in someone's mind for decades might have diverged significantly from the original Rick's intentions. It might have developed its own goals and personality. It might no longer serve Rick's interests. This could create scenarios where Rick's own planted memory constructs turn against him or develop agendas he didn't intend. The show has never revealed whether there are memory Ricks inside the main Rick we follow. Is our Rick's memory edited? Does he have memory Ricks from other Ricks or even from himself planted in his own mind? Rick could have set up defensive memory Ricks in his own head to prevent other people from editing his memories or reading his thoughts. Or other Ricks could have planted memory Ricks in our Rick's head during conflicts or alliances over the years. There's no way to know, and Rick would probably never admit it if true. The mystery of memory editing in Rick and Morty represents the show exploring transhumanist horror. If consciousness and memory can be edited freely, identity becomes fluid and unreliable. You can never be sure your memories are real. You can never be sure your personality hasn't been altered. You can never trust that your mind is only inhabited by you. Rick's memory technology makes everyone's inner life potentially compromised and manipulated. This is presented as just another tool in Rick's arsenal, but the implications are genuinely dystopian and terrifying. The show keeps revealing new aspects of how bad this can be, while never fully explaining the rules or limits, leaving us to wonder just how deep the corruption of consciousness goes in this universe. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.